My sister groom looked me up and down, scoffing at my modest charcoal dress in the middle of the grand lobby. "Why did you even invite her?" He sneered to the crowd. "A corporate drone cannot even afford a cocktail at a venue like this." I did not argue. I just watched his arrogant smile fade when the venue manager walked right past the bride, bowed his head to me, and asked if the ballroom met my executive specifications. Their laughter died the moment they realized who actually owned the estate. Before I tell you how I dismantled his fake empire, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever smiled while arrogant people dug their own graves. Growing up in the shadow of a golden child teaches you the distinct value of silence. My sister Blair spent her life curating a flawless aesthetic funded by our parents. I spent mine analyzing market trends and acquiring real estate. Tonight was supposed to be her ultimate triumph. She was marrying Trent, a boutique wealth manager who spent his days projecting the aura of a Silicon Valley pioneer. I pulled my sedan up to the valet stand of the Oakhaven Estate. The venue is a premier architectural landmark on the East Coast, featuring sweeping marble staircases, vaulted glass ceilings, and manicured botanical gardens. The kind of place that requires a 2-year waiting list and a 6-figure deposit just to secure a date. I bypassed the grand entrance mirrors and walked into the primary lobby. I wore a structured charcoal dress. It lacked sequins, designer logos, and unnecessary embellishments. It was a garment chosen for utility, not for a social media feed. Blair and Trent stood near a towering floral arrangement, holding flutes of vintage champagne, greeting a curated list of elite guests. Trent wore a custom-tailored tuxedo that looked rigid and uncomfortable. He spotted me, standing near the coat check. The manufactured charm vanished from his face, replaced by a sneer of genuine disdain. He handed his champagne flute to a passing server and gestured toward me, ensuring the surrounding circle of groomsmen and socialites could hear his assessment. "Why did you even invite her?" Trent asked, turning to Blair. "Look at that dress. She looks like she is about to audit a tax return. We are hosting a high-tier networking event disguised as a wedding. A corporate drone like her cannot even afford a cocktail at a venue like this. It ruins the aesthetic." Blair offered a sympathetic sigh, playing the role of the burdened sibling. She told Trent to keep his voice down, but she made no effort to defend me. The surrounding guests chuckled, sipping their drinks. Amused by the public degradation, I remained standing on the marble floor. I did not cross my arms or offer a defensive reply. I analyzed his posture, the strain in his tailored jacket, the desperate need to perform wealth for an audience. I let the silence stretch, allowing his mockery to hang in the air. Footsteps echoed across the lobby. Elias emerged from the corridor leading to the main ballroom. Elias is a veteran hospitality manager. He wore an immaculate black suit, his silver hair combed back with precise care. He held a leather-bound tablet containing the logistical matrix for the entire evening. Trent puffed out his chest, anticipating a greeting from the staff. He raised a hand, preparing to issue an order regarding the temperature in the dining hall. Elias did not look at the groom. He walked directly past the bride and her custom silk gown. Elias stopped 2 feet away from me. He lowered his tablet and bowed his head in a gesture of unvarnished deference. "Good evening, ma'am," Elias said, his voice carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. "The grand ballroom is prepared exactly to your executive specifications. The lighting rig is calibrated, and the security perimeter is active." The laughter died. The clinking of champagne flutes ceased. Trent dropped his hand. His sneer twisted into a knot of confusion. He stepped forward, his face flushing a dull red. "Excuse me," Trent snapped, glaring at Elias. "I am the groom. I signed the rental contract. Why are you giving status reports to a guest who does not even belong here?" I looked at the silver watch on my left wrist. I smoothed the fabric of my charcoal dress. I lifted my gaze and met his frantic eyes. "I do not just work in corporate real estate," I informed him, my voice cool and even. "I purchased the entire Oakhaven portfolio 6 months ago. I own the building you are standing in. The silence in the grand lobby stretched long enough to let the ambient classical music playing from the hidden ceiling speakers take center stage. Trent stared at me. His brain struggled to process the information. He looked at the vaulted glass ceilings above us, then at the polished marble pillars framing the entrance, and finally back at my understated charcoal dress. A sharp, cynical sneer twisted his features. He lived his entire life manufacturing optics for an audience, cultivating a digital persona built on leased sports cars and borrowed luxury. Because he operated as a fraud. He assumed everyone else utilized the exact same playbook. He believed I was bluffing to save face in front of his elite circle. He let out a loud, forced laugh. The sound echoed off the stone walls, a hollow noise designed to rally the groomsmen standing nearby. He took a deliberate step forward, closing the distance between us. He adjusted the lapels of his custom tuxedo, attempting to project physical dominance. He needed the crowd to view him as the apex authority in the room. You expect anyone in this room to believe a corporate drone bought a landmark estate. Trent scoffed. His voice carried a mocking, theatrical edge. I signed the rental agreement for this property. I wired $150,000 to secure this date. I paid for exclusivity. You do not own a single brick in this building. He turned his back to me, dismissing my existence with a wave of his hand. He directed his attention to Elias. Trent viewed hospitality workers as invisible components of his aesthetic, individuals existing solely to validate his ego. He raised his right hand and snapped his fingers, a crude, degrading gesture meant to summon a subordinate. Call your security team. Trent ordered the venue manager. Remove this disruptive guest from the premises. She is trespassing on a private event, and she is ruining the atmosphere of my reception. Elias did not move. The veteran manager kept his hands clasped behind his back. He did not reach for the communication radio clipped to his belt. He did not glance toward the front doors to signal the bouncers. He stood as rigid as the marble pillars holding up the roof. The staff at the Oakhaven Estate operated under a strict chain of command, and Trent held zero authority within that structure. Trent snapped his fingers a second time. The sharp sound fell flat in the quiet lobby. A dull red flush crept up his neck as he realized the staff refused to obey his directive. His manufactured authority was failing in real time, crumbling under the silent weight of true ownership. I let Trent stew in his own impotence. I did not raise my voice to argue. I offered a single, subtle nod to Elias. The manager reached into the inner pocket of his tailored suit jacket. He retrieved a sleek, digital ledger. The device served as the financial heartbeat of the estate, tracking every invoice, vendor payment, and client deposit. The screen glowed, cutting through the dim, romantic lighting of the lobby. Elias tapped the glass screen, pulling up the specific billing matrix for the evening. He took a measured step toward the groom. He held the tablet out, turning the screen so Trent could read the illuminated digital display. The ledger does not reflect a cleared wire transfer, Elias stated. His tone remained professional, devoid of any customer service warmth. The system reflects a required deposit submitted via a premium platinum credit card. Elias traced a steady finger down the column of recorded transactions. The interface displayed stark red text next to each chronological entry. That specific account bounced 3 separate times over the last 48 hours. Elias announced. He spoke clearly, ensuring his voice carried to the surrounding guests and the silent groomsmen. The banking institution declined the charges due to insufficient funds. The rental agreement remains unpaid. The color drained from the face of the groom. The smug certainty melted into sudden, raw panic. He stared at the red declined markers glowing on the digital interface. The timestamps documented his repeated failures. The platinum card he flashed around the city to buy influence held zero purchasing power. He was standing in a luxury estate with an empty digital wallet. Exposed before the audience, he desperately wanted to impress. I stepped closer, invading his personal space. I kept my voice low. maintaining the cold authority of an executive addressing a defaulted tenant. Standard protocol dictates that we lock the doors and cancel the vendor contracts when a client defaults on the deposit. I informed him. A venue of this caliber does not operate on credit. We do not host luxury receptions on a promise. If the funds do not clear the designated holding accounts by the deadline, the estate remains dark. Trent swallowed hard. His throat clicked in the quiet lobby. His eyes darted from the tablet to my face, searching for a way out of the financial trap. The swagger he carried moments ago evaporated, replaced by the frantic energy of a cornered animal. I authorized my staff to proceed with the logistical setup anyway, I explained, detailing the financial grace I extended against my better judgment. I greenlit the installation of the imported white orchids lining the center aisle. I approved the union labor required to rig the crystal chandeliers in the dining hall. I paid the premium catering deposits out of my own operating budget to ensure the chefs prepared the menu. I looked past Trent, glancing at my sister. Blair stood near the floral arch, clutching her custom silk gown. Her flawless bridal facade showed the first microscopic cracks of doubt. She watched her groom unravel, unable to comprehend the ledger dispute unfolding in front of her curated guest list. I did not front the capital for your benefit, I told the groom, bringing my focus back to his sweating face. I authorized the labor to prevent a public humiliation for my sister. I knew a locked door and a dark venue would shatter her milestone. I assumed you encountered a minor routing delay. I expected you to walk into this lobby tonight and settle your debt with a certified cashier check before the reception began. The groomsmen standing nearby shifted their weight, exchanging nervous glances. The socialites holding champagne flutes fell silent, their eyes locked on the sweating groom. The illusion of his limitless wealth began to fracture under the weight of empirical evidence. The men he recruited to stand beside him at the altar offered no words of defense. Trent looked at the tablet, then looked at the crowd. Survival instinct overrode his logic. He needed to construct a shield to protect his fabricated persona. He pulled his shoulders back, forcing a strained, artificial smile onto his face. He waved his trembling hand in the air, attempting to dismiss the declined transactions as a trivial administrative inconvenience. "This is a ridiculous clerical error," Trent declared, his voice pitched higher than normal, lacking its usual smooth resonance. "The banking algorithms flag large venue deposits for fraud protection all the time. My primary liquidity is not tied up in a standard domestic checking account." He turned to face the curated list of elite guests, pitching a desperate narrative to save his reputation. He needed them to believe the facade remained intact. He needed to project the image of a titan of industry temporarily hindered by red tape. "I am currently structuring a high-yield international corporate merger," Trent claimed, weaving a frantic web of financial jargon. "The bulk of my capital is temporarily locked in an overseas escrow vault, pending regulatory approval from the Asian markets. The asset transfer requires multiple layers of international clearance. The funds will clear the designated holding accounts by midnight. This is a non-issue." The tight, manufactured smile on the face of the groom vanished. Trent finished his desperate pitch regarding the overseas escrow vault and clapped his hands together. The sharp sound was intended to break the stagnant tension settling over the grand lobby. He operated on the assumption that if he kept the schedule moving, the guests would forget the digital ledger displaying his declined credit cards. He reached out and placed a hand on the lower back of his bride, attempting to guide her forward. "Let us move into the grand ballroom," Trent announced, projecting a loud, artificial cheerfulness. "The culinary team prepared an exceptional menu for us tonight. We have vintage champagne waiting to be poured. We are here to celebrate a milestone." He turned back to Elias for a brief second, his eyes hard and threatening, attempting to reassert his dominance over the hospitality staff. "Keep the floral arrangements in place and ensure the catering staff begins the dinner service." Trent instructed the venue manager. "The wire transfer from my international holding account will hit your designated terminal by midnight. Enjoy the evening." Trent tried to usher the groomsmen and the elite socialites toward the heavy mahogany doors of the dining hall. He wanted to plunge the crowd into the loud music and the dim, romantic lighting of the reception. He needed a distraction. He needed the sheer volume of a party to drown out the reality of his unpaid invoices. A woman stepped out from the curated circle of guests, placing herself directly in his path. She did not wear a flowing pastel gown or a sequined cocktail dress. She wore a tailored, deep emerald suit that draped flawlessly over her frame. Her posture radiated cold, unyielding authority. She was an African-American woman who commanded the space the moment her heels struck the polished marble floor. Her name was Maya. She was my sister-in-law. Maya married my estranged older brother 5 years ago. She endured the same toxic holiday dinners and the same subtle, degrading comments from our parents that I survived. She recognized the fabricated prestige of this family because she possessed a brilliant, analytical mind trained to hunt corporate deception. Maya operated as a senior compliance director for a federal wealth management watchdog. She spent her days tracking financial phantoms, auditing fraudulent portfolios, and dismantling predatory brokers. She did not tolerate parasites, and she certainly did not tolerate men who lied to her face. Trent halted. His manufactured cheerfulness faltered as he looked at the woman blocking his access to the ballroom. He recognized Maya, but he underestimated her utility. He viewed her as just another extended family member required to fill a seat at a back table. "Maya," Trent said, forcing a hollow chuckle, "I am glad you could make the ceremony, but we are trying to transition the guests into the dining hall. We can catch up over a drink inside." Maya did not move. She did not return his polite greeting. She did not offer a congratulation regarding the wedding. She looked at him with the detached, clinical precision of a predator observing a cornered target. "We are not going inside," Maya stated. Her voice was smooth, carrying a chilling resonance that cut through the lingering murmurs of the crowd. "And you are not catching up with anyone over a drink." Trent frowned. His hand slipped away from the waist of his bride. Blair looked between her groom and her sister-in-law, her flawless facade fracturing further as she sensed the sudden shift in the atmospheric pressure of the lobby. Maya unclasped the brass lock of her structured leather clutch. The sharp metallic click echoed in the quiet lobby, a sound that drew the attention of every socialite and groomsman in the vicinity. She reached inside the dark interior of the bag. She did not retrieve a compact mirror or a tube of lipstick. She extracted a folded document. She held the paper by the edge and flicked her wrist, allowing the pages to unfold. The crisp white parchment bore a distinct, embossed federal seal at the top. It was not a wedding itinerary. It was a formal government audit report. "I run the compliance division for the Federal Regulatory Board that oversees domestic wealth management," Maya explained, her dark eyes locking onto his terrified face. "When Blair announced her engagement to a boutique brokerage founder, I experienced a professional curiosity. I wanted to ensure my sister-in-law was tethering her future to a stable entity." Trent swallowed hard. The color drained from his face for the second time that evening. He recognized the federal seal stamped on the document. He knew exactly what kind of data that paper contained. "This is neither the time nor the place," Trent whispered, his voice dropping into a frantic, desperate rasp. He took a step forward, reaching a hand out as if he intended to snatch the document from her grasp. "This is a private family event. Put that away right now." Maya did not flinch. She held the document steady, ignoring his outstretched hand. "You stood in this lobby and told these people that your primary liquidity is locked in an overseas escrow vault," Maya continued, raising her voice just enough to ensure the entire curated guest list heard the autopsy of his career. "You claimed that you are structuring a high-yield international corporate merger in the Asian markets. You blamed your declined credit cards on a banking algorithm and promised to wire $150,000 by midnight." She looked down at the printed text on the page, then back up at the sweating groom. "Your boutique brokerage firm does not hold a single international asset," Maya announced. systematically dismantling his lie. You do not possess clearance to trade in the Asian markets. You are not structuring a corporate merger. Trent opened his mouth to argue, to spin another frantic web of financial jargon. But his vocal cords seized. The empirical proof held in her hand suffocated his ability to speak. I initiated a deep background investigation into your corporate ledgers earlier this week, Maya revealed, walking the crowd through the reality of his fabricated empire. Your brokerage firm operates on a dangerous leverage model. You utilized client deposits as collateral to secure high-risk, short-term speculative loans. You attempted to play the market with money that did not belong to you, hoping to generate a personal windfall to fund this flashy lifestyle. The groomsmen standing near the coat check shifted uncomfortably. The men who spent the last year listening to Trent brag about his limitless wealth now stared at him in silent horror. Blair covered her mouth with her trembling hand, her custom silk gown rustling against the marble floor. The speculative market turned against you last month, Maya stated, delivering the cold, unyielding facts of his ruin. Your investments tanked. The private lenders issued severe margin calls, demanding immediate repayment on the defaulted loans. You lacked the liquid capital to cover the deficit. You tried to shuffle funds between domestic shell accounts to hide the rot from the regulatory boards. She tapped her manicured fingernail against the embossed federal seal. You failed to hide the rot, Maya declared. She stepped closer to the groom, invading his personal space, forcing him to confront the reality of his insolvency. Your accounts were not flagged by a temporary fraud protection algorithm, Maya informed him, dropping the final hammer on his fabricated persona. Federal regulators audited your firm. They discovered the systemic leverage defaults and the missing client deposits. The lobby fell into a stagnant, suffocating silence. The ambient classical music playing from the ceiling speakers sounded like a funeral dirge. On Tuesday morning, while you were busy finalizing the floral arrangements for this luxury reception, the government executed a total asset freeze, Maya concluded, ensuring every guest in the lobby understood the true financial status of the groom. They seized your domestic checking accounts. They seized your corporate holding portfolios. They seized the boutique brokerage firm you used to project this wealthy aesthetic. You do not have a wire transfer pending at midnight. You are entirely insolvent. You are standing at the altar with zero net worth. The echo of the federal asset freeze hung over the grand lobby, a heavy, suffocating truth that shattered the curated aesthetic of the evening. Trent stood frozen near the entrance of the ballroom, his custom tuxedo suddenly looking like a cheap costume. Maya took a deliberate step back, her tailored emerald suit catching the ambient light. She delivered the financial autopsy and yielded the floor, leaving the groom stranded in the wreckage of his own fabricated empire. The groomsmen stared at the marble floorboards. The elite socialites tightened their grips on their champagne flutes, too stunned to whisper. The illusion was dead. Before Trent could formulate a pathetic excuse or beg the crowd for understanding, a sudden commotion broke the stagnant silence. Two figures pushed their way through the outer ring of stunned guests, Richard and Caroline, the enabler parents who spent decades curating a flawless suburban facade, rushed into the center of the lobby. Caroline wore an expensive designer gown crafted from imported silk. Richard wore a rigid, classic tuxedo, projecting the image of a seasoned patriarch. They had been mingling near the cocktail bar, oblivious to the confrontation until the shifting atmosphere drew their attention. They looked at Trent, noting his pale, sweating face. They looked at Maya, recognizing the unyielding posture of a federal compliance director. Then, they looked at me. Logic dictates that parents discovering their future son-in-law is an insolvent fraud under federal investigation should intervene to protect their daughter. They should pull the bride away, demand answers from the groom, and cancel the ceremony to prevent a legal catastrophe. But my parents never operated on logic. They operated entirely on optics. Caroline did not turn toward the groom to demand an explanation. She did not comfort her crying daughter. The matriarch pivoted on her designer heels and directed her toxic rage directly at me. For 30 years, Caroline viewed my analytical nature and my refusal to perform wealth as a personal insult to her parenting. She preferred Blair, the golden child who understood how to smile for photographs and spend money to maintain an image. Facing the public collapse of that image, Caroline sought a scapegoat. She needed a villain to blame for the disruption of her perfect milestone. Caroline marched across the marble floor, her silk gown rustling loudly in the quiet room. She stopped 3 feet away from me, her face flushed red with unhinged indignation. She raised a manicured finger and pointed it at my chest. "You planned this spectacle on purpose?" Caroline hissed, her voice vibrating with venom. "You waited until the lobby was full of our friends and colleagues to humiliate your sister. You always harbored a petty, jealous obsession with her happiness. You could not stand watching her marry a successful man while you sit alone in a corporate office." I did not flinch. I kept my hands resting at my sides, observing her irrational outburst with clinical detachment. "You just confessed that you own this entire venue," Caroline continued, issuing a desperate, entitled demand. "You possess the authority to waive the rental fee. You will instruct your manager to unlock those ballroom doors immediately. You will absorb the cost of the catering and the floral arrangements. Consider it your wedding gift to your sister. We are going to proceed with this reception, and you are going to fix this mess right now." She demanded I subsidize a fraud to protect her social standing. She expected me to utilize the real estate portfolio I built through grueling, relentless work to cover the bounced checks of a criminal. She believed familial obligation superseded my financial boundaries. I looked at my mother, dissecting the layers of her delusion. I saw a woman terrified of the whispers that would echo through her country club tomorrow morning. "I do not operate a charity for federal suspects," I stated, my voice echoing cold and resolute across the lobby. "I do not sponsor fake empires. Your future son-in-law lied to you. He lied to my sister. And he lied to the government. My venue requires payment for services rendered." The doors remain locked. Richard stepped forward, attempting to reinforce his wife. The patriarch puffed out his chest, trying to project a commanding presence to intimidate me into compliance. "Listen to your mother." "Harper," Richard ordered, using a condescending tone he perfected during my childhood. "Trent is a visionary. He is navigating a complex corporate landscape. Sometimes visionary entrepreneurs face temporary cash flow disruptions. Family protects family during rough patches. You are prioritizing a business invoice over the bond of blood. Unlock the doors and let the boy breathe." He defended the predator because acknowledging Trent was a con artist meant acknowledging his own failure as a judge of character. Richard fancied himself a savvy investor, a man who recognized raw talent. He endorsed Trent from the beginning, charmed by the leased sports cars and the hollow tech buzzwords. Admitting Trent was a fraud meant admitting he was easily duped. I shifted my gaze from Caroline to Richard. I let his condescending order hang in the air, refusing to bow to his fabricated authority. "You speak with profound confidence regarding his financial landscape," I observed, keeping my tone deadly flat. "You call him a visionary facing a temporary disruption." I took a slow step forward, cutting the physical distance between us. "Tell me, Richard," I asked, my voice carrying a sharp, interrogative edge. "How do you plan to fund your retirement?" The question hit him like a physical blow. Richard blinked, his commanding posture faltering. He frowned, confused by the sudden pivot away from the wedding venue dispute. "My retirement portfolio is none of your concern," Richard stammered, attempting to recover his footing. "I spent 3 decades building a robust financial foundation. We own our home. We possess diversified assets. We are perfectly secure." I reached down and unlatched the brass clasp of my slim leather briefcase, resting on a nearby cocktail table. When you spend your days acquiring commercial real estate, you develop a distinct habit of running deep background checks on any entity associated with your family, I explained, opening the leather flap. You learn to verify the integrity of the soil before you build a foundation. When Blair brought Trent into this family, I did not listen to his elevator pitches. I searched the county property records. I extracted a thick, stapled document from the briefcase. The heavy parchment bore the official blue ink stamp of the municipal clerk office. Richard stared at the document. The color began to drain from his face, mirroring the exact physiological panic Trent displayed minutes prior. Caroline lowered her pointing finger, her unhinged rage morphing into sudden, chilling apprehension. You spent 30 years paying off the mortgage on your colonial home in the suburbs, I stated, reciting the financial history they bragged about at every holiday dinner. You held the deed free and clear. It was your primary asset, your ultimate safety net for your twilight years. I held the document up, ensuring the embossed municipal stamp was visible to the parents. 4 months ago, you walked into a regional bank and leveraged that safety net, I revealed, dismantling his illusion of a robust financial foundation. You signed a silent second mortgage on your family home. You pulled nearly $500,000 of equity out of the property. Caroline gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. The elite guests in the lobby murmured, shocked by the exposure of such a desperate financial maneuver. You handed that liquid cash directly to Trent, I continued, my gaze locking onto my father. You believed his visionary sales pitch. He told you he needed a silent infusion of capital to expand his boutique brokerage firm. He promised you a staggering return on investment, claiming your equity would double within a year. You thought you were buying a seat at the table of a future billionaire. Richard opened his mouth, his jaw trembling, but he could not formulate a denial. The county record in my hand was an undeniable, empirical truth. Trent told you he poured that money into the market, I said, turning my head to look at the sweating groom standing near the locked ballroom doors. Trent refused to meet my eyes. He stared at his own shoes. His shoulders slumped in total defeat. I looked back at my parents, ready to deliver the fatal execution of their twilight years. Trent never invested a single dollar of your equity into his brokerage firm, I announced, dropping the ultimate consequence onto their pristine suburban lives. He did not buy stocks. He did not expand his corporate footprint. The silence in the grand lobby grew heavy, thick with impending ruin. Trent launched a different technology startup 3 years ago, before he met Blair, I explained, outlining the dark history he kept hidden from the family. That venture collapsed under allegations of severe fraud and investor deception. He avoided a federal indictment back then by agreeing to massive, out-of-court civil settlements. He signed non-disclosure agreements and promised to repay the victims. I tapped my fingernail against the blue municipal stamp on the foreclosure document. When the settlement deadlines arrived 4 months ago, Trent lacked the capital to pay his victims, I concluded, my voice echoing with cold, lethal finality. He needed cash to stay out of a prison cell, so he manipulated your vanity. He pocketed your $500,000 and used your home equity to secretly pay off the litigation debts from his previous failed startup. He stole your house to erase his own past. Your money is gone. The bank holds the deed to your home again, and the man you trusted is entirely insolvent. You are financially ruined. The revelation regarding the stolen home equity settled over the grand lobby like a heavy winter frost. Richard and Caroline stood paralyzed near the center of the room. The reality of their impending foreclosure shattered their curated suburban prestige, rendering the enabler parents mute. Trent remained anchored near the locked mahogany doors of the ballroom, staring at the polished marble floorboards. He offered no defense. He possessed no counter-argument. The empirical paper trail I held in my hand dismantled his final layer of defense, while the groom and the parents succumbed to the quiet devastation of their financial ruin. A different reaction began to unfold a few feet away. Blair stood near the towering floral archway. For 30 years, my sister operated as the golden child, shielded from consequence and insulated by our parents. She tied her entire identity to the flawless aesthetic of this specific evening. She curated the guest list, selected the imported white orchids, and demanded perfection from every vendor. Accepting the truth meant accepting she was the primary victim of a calculated con artist. Her pristine ego refused to absorb the blow. The bridal facade began to crack. Blair started to hyperventilate. The rhythm of her breathing grew erratic and shallow. The intricate corset of her custom silk gown, designed to project an image of effortless elegance, now functioned as a suffocating restriction. She clutched the heavy fabric of her skirt with her right hand, her knuckles turning stark white. She looked at Trent, then at the federal compliance report resting in my hands, and finally at the municipal foreclosure document I held. Her mind fractured under the weight of the conflicting data. She needed an anchor. She needed a tangible object to tether her sanity to the narrative she spent the last 2 years building. Blair raised her left hand. She extended her arm toward the crowd of elite socialites and stunned groomsmen. She splayed her fingers wide, turning her wrist so the ambient light from the vaulted glass ceiling struck the jewelry resting on her fourth finger. The engagement ring was a staggering piece of hardware. It featured a prominent central stone, flanked by a halo of smaller gems set in a bright, polished band. For the past year, Blair utilized that ring as a blunt instrument of social dominance. She flashed it in photographs, tapped it against wine glasses at upscale brunches, and weaponized it to assert her superiority over her peers. "Look at this," Blair demanded, her voice a ragged, desperate plea echoing through the silent lobby. She took a staggering step forward, holding her hand up like a defensive shield. She refused to look at the government documents. She directed her attention to the guests, begging the audience to validate her delusion. "You are all listening to a vindictive narrative," Blair rationalized, her words spilling out in a frantic rush. "Trent is a successful wealth manager. He is not facing a margin call. He did not steal a mortgage. Men who are drowning in litigation debt do not walk into high-end boutiques and purchase 5-carat radiant cut diamonds." She turned her frantic gaze toward me, her eyes wide and brimming with unshed tears. "A custom piece of this magnitude costs a fortune," Blair insisted, attempting to use the physical jewelry as empirical proof of his hidden wealth. "He commissioned this ring from a private dealer. He secured the center stone from an exclusive vault. A man who possesses zero net worth cannot manifest a diamond like this. The federal audit must be a clerical error." She anchored her entire reality to the refractive index of the stone on her finger. She believed the physical symbol of their union served as an impenetrable defense against the allegations of fraud. Trent did not confirm her story. He did not step forward to wrap a comforting arm around her shoulders. He kept his eyes glued to his own shoes. The silence from the groom spoke volumes, but Blair ignored his physical surrender. I looked at my sister, observing her performative desperation. I felt a brief, clinical wave of pity for the golden child, but I refused to let the delusion persist. A tumor must be exposed to the light before it can be excised. I shifted my gaze across the lobby and made eye contact with Maya. My sister-in-law stood near the cocktail bar, holding the federal audit report. As a senior compliance director, Maya understood the fundamental mechanics of asset verification. You never trust a physical asset without an independent, authorized audit. A flashing stone signifies nothing until a professional examines the specific gravity and the thermal conductivity. Maya delivered a subtle, imperceptible nod. She turned her head and signaled a guest standing quietly near the shadows of the coat check alcove. The man stepped out of the periphery and walked onto the main marble floor. He did not wear a tuxedo. He wore a muted, tailored gray suit that blended into the background. He carried a small, reinforced leather case in his left hand. He moved with the quiet, deliberate precision of an individual accustomed to handling high-value assets under intense scrutiny. He was not a friend of the groom. He was not an extended family member. Operating a premier hospitality portfolio requires mitigating extreme liability, I explained, my voice cutting through the frantic hyperventilation of the bride. When a venue like the Oakhaven Estate hosts elite receptions, millions of dollars in uninsured jewelry walk through these doors. Guests lose earrings, Brides misplace heirlooms. To protect my corporate entity from fraudulent insurance claims, I require stringent verification protocols. The man in the gray suit stopped a few feet away from Blair. He unclasped the small leather case. I retain a master gemologist on staff for every high-tier event, I announced, introducing the silent figure. He evaluates and catalogs the high-value items on the property before the reception begins. He ensures the venue assumes zero liability for synthetic or contested assets. The appraiser did not offer a polite introduction. He operated with pure, clinical detachment. He reached into his leather case and extracted a specialized optical loupe. He placed the small, cylindrical magnifying device over his right eye, securing it in place. He retrieved a sleek, metallic ultraviolet penlight from the interior pocket of his suit jacket. "May I examine the ring?" the appraiser asked, extending a steady, gloved hand toward the bride. Blair hesitated. Her breathing hitched. She looked at the gloved hand, then looked back at Trent. The groom squeezed his eyes shut, unable to witness the impending autopsy of his final lie. Blair swallowed hard. She believed the examination would exonerate him. She believed the master jeweler would confirm the staggering value of the stone, proving her sister and the federal government wrong. She placed her trembling left hand over the open palm of the appraiser. The lobby fell into a breathless hush. The elite socialites leaned forward, their champagne flutes forgotten. The groomsmen stood rigid. The entire room focused on the intersection of the gloved hand and the sparkling ring. The appraiser raised her hand to eye level. He clicked the button on the base of his metallic penlight. A concentrated beam of pure white light struck the center stone. He leaned in, his right eye magnified by the optical loupe. He examined the surface of the gem, searching for the microscopic natural carbon inclusions that define a genuine diamond. He tilted her hand slightly to the left, testing the light dispersion and the refractive angles. The beam illuminated the facets, casting sharp prisms of light across the tailored suit of the appraiser. He maintained the intense scrutiny for a full 30 seconds. He checked the prongs securing the stone. He ran his thumb along the underside of the band, feeling the weight and searching for a specific metallurgical stamp. The silence stretched, thick and unforgiving. The appraiser clicked the penlight off. He lowered her hand and stepped back. He removed the optical loupe from his right eye and placed the tools back into his reinforced leather case. He closed the lid with a soft snap. He turned his head, addressing me directly as the owner of the estate, fulfilling his contractual obligation to report the asset value. The piece holds zero underwriting liability for the venue, the appraiser stated, his voice a flat, factual drone echoing in the quiet lobby. Blair frowned, her brow furrowing in deep confusion. She did not understand the insurance terminology. She demanded he speak plainly. She asked him to announce the carat weight and the clarity grade to the crowd. The appraiser looked at the bride, delivering the verdict with chilling precision. The center stone fails the thermal conductivity test. The appraiser explained, dismantling the optical illusion. The refractive index is artificial, and the facets display a synthetic color dispersion. It is not carbon. The stone is a high-grade cubic zirconia, manufactured in a laboratory to mimic the dimensions of a radiant cut diamond. Blair let out a soft, choked gasp. She pulled her hand back, clutching it against her chest as if the ring suddenly burned her skin. Furthermore, the appraiser continued, finalizing the execution of the hardware. The setting lacks a hallmark stamp. The band is not forged from platinum or white gold. It is a cheap base metal alloy mixed with copper, dipped in a superficial rhodium wash to provide a temporary reflective shine. The rhodium is already beginning to tarnish near the prongs. The retail value of the entire piece is less than $200. The crowd erupted into hushed, shocked whispers. The physical manifestation of future security, the weapon Blair used to assert her social dominance, was a worthless piece of glass set in copper. Trent did not just lie about his corporate empire, his international mergers, and his stolen home equity. He faked the physical symbol of their union. The revelation regarding the cubic zirconia hung in the air, a physical weight that crushed the remaining oxygen out of the grand lobby. The master jeweler closed the lid of his reinforced leather case with a soft, final snap. He offered a brief nod of acknowledgement in my direction and walked back into the shadows of the coat check alcove. His job complete. Blair stood near the floral archway, staring at her left hand. The piece of copper and glass felt like an anchor dragging her toward the marble floor. Her pristine bridal facade shattered. The custom silk gown she wore, designed to project an image of effortless elite status, now looked like a tragic costume. She expected her groom to fall to his knees, to beg for forgiveness, to offer some fabricated excuse about being defrauded by a rogue diamond broker. She waited for him to provide a narrative that would protect her ego from the judging eyes of the socialites. Trent did none of those things. Empathy requires a conscience, and a cornered fraudster possesses only a primal survival instinct. He did not look at the tears ruining the expensive makeup of his future wife. He did not offer a word of comfort to the woman he planned to marry. He simply stepped around her. He turned his back on the weeping bride, ignored the paralyzed parents, and faced the crowd of elite guests. He adjusted the lapels of his custom tuxedo, pulling the fabric taut, and forced a grotesque, manic smile onto his sweating face. "Let us not get bogged down in minor administrative trivialities," Trent announced, his voice straining to project a jovial, commanding tone. He clapped his hands together. The sharp, desperate sound echoed against the vaulted glass ceilings, demanding the attention of the room. "The catering team is waiting inside. We have a 5-course culinary experience prepared by award-winning chefs. Everyone, please move toward the dining hall. The reception begins right now." He tried to herd the guests like livestock. He waved his arms, gesturing frantically toward the towering mahogany doors located at the far end of the lobby. He ignored the federal compliance audit resting in the hands of my sister-in-law. He ignored the digital ledger displaying his bounced credit cards. He operated on a singular, blinding objective. He needed to change the environment. He needed the loud music, the dim lighting, and the flowing alcohol of a party to drown out the reality of his insolvency. I watched his eyes. He did not look at the ballroom doors he was pointing toward. His gaze kept darting back over his shoulder, scanning the primary entrance of the estate. He stared through the front glass panels, watching the valet drop-off lane. He checked the luxury watch on his wrist every 10 seconds. Trent did not care about celebrating a romantic union. He needed the reception to begin because he was running against a strict, unforgiving clock. The entire wedding was a Trojan horse. In the ruthless sector of venture capital, perception dictates funding. Investors do not write 8-figure checks to desperate men drowning in federal audits and margin calls. They write checks to apex performers who project an aura of untouchable, limitless success. Trent needed the opulent backdrop of the Oakhaven Estate. He needed the imported white orchids, the crystal chandeliers, and the illusion of a flawless high society marriage to serve as a theatrical stage. He was waiting for a specific arrival. He was waiting for Marcus Thorne. Thorne was a billionaire venture capitalist, an elusive financial whale who rarely attended social functions. Trent spent 2 years leveraging every hollow connection he possessed to secure an invitation acceptance from the billionaire. The groom intended to use the luxurious optics of the reception to corner Thorne over a glass of vintage champagne. Trent planned to pitch his fraudulent technology startup one last time, hoping the manufactured prestige of the estate would convince the investor to sign a life-saving term sheet. A signature from a venture capitalist of that caliber would trigger an immediate, staggering cash injection. It would provide the exact liquidity Trent needed to pay off his defaulted loans, settle his federal debts, and flee the jurisdiction before the authorities finalized his indictment. The wedding was never a celebration of love. It was a customized pitch meeting disguised as a milestone, and the billionaire investor was scheduled to arrive at any moment. "Please," Trent urged the crowd. his voice pitching higher as the elite socialites refused to move toward the dining hall. The champagne is getting warm. Let us go inside and celebrate this beautiful evening. He took a few steps toward the ballroom, expecting the groomsmen and the guests to follow his physical lead. He assumed social momentum would override the awkward reality of the exposed cubic zirconia. I reached into the pocket of my charcoal dress. I extracted my smartphone. I did not raise my voice to argue with his frantic herd mentality. I did not issue a counter-command to the paralyzed crowd. I accessed the central security interface for the hospitality portfolio. The application controlled every physical access point on the sprawling property. I looked at the sweating groom, currently trying to push a stunned groomsman toward the dining hall. I tapped the digital screen. A heavy, mechanical thud echoed across the grand lobby. The sound originated from the far end of the room. The towering mahogany doors leading into the grand ballroom possessed integrated electromagnetic deadbolts, designed to secure the venue during off hours or security breaches. The system engaged instantly. The heavy steel bolts slid into the reinforced floor tracks with a final, unyielding clank. Trent froze. He stood 3 feet away from the entrance. He reached out and pushed against the carved wood. The heavy panels did not yield a single millimeter. He pushed harder, driving his shoulder into the doorframe, desperate to break the seal. The entrance remained locked. He spun around, his face a mask of unfiltered panic. He looked at Elias, demanding the manager produce a key or an override code. Elias kept his hands folded behind his back, his eyes focused straight ahead, ignoring the insolvent client. Trent looked at me. He saw the glowing smartphone resting in my palm. "You are hosting a phantom reception," I informed him, my voice carrying a lethal, acoustic clarity across the marble floor. "You cannot usher guests into a room you do not own." I turned my attention to the veteran venue manager. "Elias?" I said. "Yes, ma'am." Elias responded immediately, his posture rigid and attentive. "The client failed to secure the required deposit," I stated, formalizing the termination of his contract on the estate record. "The financial grace period is officially revoked. Suspend all venue services." Elias reached for the communication radio, clipped to his belt. He relayed a swift, coded instruction to the invisible army of hospitality workers operating behind the scenes. The shift in the environment was instantaneous. A side door near the cocktail alcove swung open. A line of uniformed catering staff filed into the lobby. They did not carry silver platters of gourmet hors d'oeuvres. They carried empty plastic utility crates. They moved with silent, synchronized efficiency. The guests watched in awe as the waiters approached the temporary bar stations set up for the arrival hour. The staff retrieved the chilled bottles of vintage champagne, pulling them from these silver ice buckets, and packed them away into the padded crates. Another team arrived and removed the crystal serving bowls filled with imported caviar. They dismantled the cocktail infrastructure right in front of the hungry, thirsty crowd. They folded the crisp white linens and wheeled the portable bars back through the service corridors. "Wait," Trent pleaded, taking a stumbling step toward the catering staff. He reached out, trying to grab a bottle of champagne from a passing waiter. "You cannot do this. I have an investor arriving. I just need 1 hour of service. Just give me 1 hour of the open bar. Let me use the lobby." The staff ignored him, dodging his grasping hands, adhering strictly to the mandate of the property owner. Within 60 seconds, the luxury amenities vanished. The lobby transformed from an opulent pre-reception gathering space into a sterile, barren transit hall. "There will be no 5-course dinner tonight," I announced to the silent crowd, my voice echoing in the newly emptied space. "There will be no networking opportunities. The culinary team is currently breaking down the kitchen and packing the inventory." I looked directly at Trent. His chest heaved as he watched the final crate of champagne disappear behind a service door. "You plan to use my crystal chandeliers and my premium catering to trick a venture capitalist into saving your life," I told him, dissecting his hidden motive with surgical precision. You wanted to wrap your fraudulent startup in the aesthetic of my hard work. You wanted a luxury facade to hide your federal crimes and your stolen mortgages. I slipped my phone back into the pocket of my dress. The facade is gone. I concluded. You are going to face your billionaire investor standing in a dry lobby, holding a fake diamond, surrounded by the family you ruined. You have nowhere left to hide. The stark reality of the barren lobby settled over the curated guest list. The elegant cocktail bars were gone. The silver ice buckets and the crystal serving platters disappeared behind the service corridor. The ambient jazz music ceased, leaving only the stagnant, tense silence of a room stripped of its luxury. The elite socialites shifted on their feet, their empty hands resting awkwardly at their sides. The illusion of a flawless high society reception evaporated, leaving a cold, unyielding truth in its wake. Trent stood a few feet away from the locked mahogany doors, his chest heaving, his eyes darting across the empty space. He was a fraud stripped of his aesthetic armor, exposed to the judging stares of the colleagues he spent years trying to impress. The heavy glass doors at the main entrance of the estate swung open. A gust of cool evening air swept into the lobby, carrying the faint scent of the manicured botanical gardens outside. A single figure walked across the threshold. Marcus Thorne possessed a distinct, quiet authority that required zero theatrical enhancement. He was a billionaire venture capitalist, a man who dictated the trajectory of entire financial sectors with a single signature. He did not wear a flashy, custom tuxedo. He wore a dark, understated charcoal suit cut with mathematical precision. His silver hair was neatly trimmed, and his eyes held the cold, assessing calculation of an apex predator. He did not rush. He stepped onto the polished marble floorboards, expecting to be greeted by a host, a glass of premium champagne, and the deferential whispers of aspiring entrepreneurs. Trent spotted the billionaire immediately. The arrival of the venture capitalist triggered a primal, unfiltered survival instinct within the mind of the groom. The federal compliance audit resting in Maya hands vanished from his peripheral vision. The municipal foreclosure document containing his stolen home equity ceased to matter. The locked ballroom doors became irrelevant. Trent viewed Thorne not as a guest, but as a walking vault of liquid capital. He believed a single signature on a term sheet would erase his sins, satisfy his creditors, and nullify the impending legal indictments. Blair stood less than 3 feet away from her groom. The bride was weeping softly, the tears ruining her expensive makeup, her hand still clutching the worthless piece of copper and glass. She looked at Trent, her eyes begging for comfort, seeking a shred of human empathy to anchor her fracturing reality. She reached her hand out, her fingertips grazing the sleeve of his tailored jacket. Trent did not offer a word of solace. He did not pull his crying bride into an embrace or apologize for the humiliation. Empathy requires a conscience, and Trent possessed a ledger. He ripped his arm away from her grasp. He brushed past the weeping bride, knocking her hand aside with a sharp, dismissive motion. He abandoned the woman he promised to protect at the altar without a second thought. Trent broke into a frantic sprint across the lobby. The custom tailoring of his tuxedo failed under the chaotic kinetic energy of his movement. The expensive fabric wrinkled across his shoulders. The seams strained as he pushed himself forward. His leather shoes slapped loudly against the marble floorboards, the desperate, hollow sound echoing against the vaulted glass ceilings. He ignored the shocked gasps of the socialites as he pushed his way through the crowd. His eyes locked onto the billionaire, standing near the valet entrance. Marcus Thorne stopped walking. The veteran investor narrowed his eyes, observing the erratic approach of the groom. Trent cut Thorne off before the billionaire could take another 5 steps into the venue. The groom skidded to a halt, his chest heaving, his face flushed a deep, unhealthy crimson. Sweat beaded on his forehead, catching the dim, ambient light. He did not offer a polite greeting. He did not offer to take the coat of his guest. He launched directly into a manic, rapid-fire sales pitch. "Marcus, thank you for coming," Trent gasped. his voice a ragged, breathless scrape. We are experiencing a minor logistical delay with the dining hall, but the evening is proceeding. I am thrilled you arrived. Thorne did not reply. The billionaire stood perfectly still, his posture relaxed but guarded. He looked past the sweating groom. His sharp eyes scanned the lobby. He noted the locked mahogany doors. He saw the empty spaces where the cocktail bars used to reside. He observed the weeping bride, the paralyzed parents, and the stunned guests. Thorne processed the environmental data with clinical speed. He recognized the distinct atmosphere of a collapsed enterprise. I know we planned to discuss the final investment round over dinner, Trent continued, speaking faster, desperate to fill the silence. But the market waits for no one. The core technology of my brokerage platform is ready for immediate deployment. I possess the user acquisition models. I hold the market projections. I just need your final authorization to trigger the scaling phase. Trent reached his trembling hand inside the breast pocket of his ruined tuxedo jacket. He extracted a folded document. The thick parchment was a finalized term sheet, a legal contract dictating the terms of a massive venture capital cash injection. I brought the paperwork with me, Trent urged, thrusting the folded document into the space between them. We can finalize the partnership right here. You sign this term sheet, and my firm receives the immediate liquidity required to dominate the sector. You capture a disruptive technology at the ground floor. It is a mutually beneficial execution. Just sign the paper. Marcus, I need the cash injection tonight. Thorne looked down at the trembling hand holding the term sheet. He did not reach for the document. He slowly raised his gaze, locking eyes with the frantic groom. In the high-stakes arena of venture capital, desperation is the ultimate repellent. Investors seek founders who project unyielding stability and cold, rational foresight. They avoid erratic actors who sweat through their suits and beg for money in the middle of a dry, silent lobby. Thorne looked at Trent with unvarnished, profound disgust. The billionaire saw right through the hollow tech buzzwords and the fabricated confidence. He saw a man drowning in his own deceit, searching for a life raft funded by someone else. Thorne offered a slow, deliberate shake of his head. He took a single step backward, creating physical distance between himself and the frantic groom. He intended to turn around and walk back out the glass doors, refusing to engage with a toxic liability. Trent registered the rejection. The subtle backward step severed his final tether to reality. His mind fractured. The impending federal arrest, the unpaid vendors, and the stolen equity crashed down upon his shoulders. He needed that signature to survive. Logic vanished, replaced by unhinged mania. Trent crossed a fundamental physical boundary. He reached into his pocket and retrieved a heavy, customized fountain pen. He lunged forward. He closed the distance Thorne just created. Trent grabbed the right wrist of the billionaire investor. He attempted to physically pry the hand of the older man open. He tried to force the heavy metallic pen and the folded term sheet directly into the palm of his VIP guest. "You do not understand," Trent hissed, his voice dropping into a feral, threatening register, his fingers digging into the tailored sleeve of the billionaire. "You have to sign this contract. You owe me this investment. I built the model. You are not walking out of this building without signing this paper." Thorne recoiled, his face hardening into a mask of pure ice. Touching a billionaire uninvited is a fatal professional error. Attempting to physically force a signature is an act of pure hostility. I stood near the cocktail alcove, observing the escalation. A verbal pitch is a nuisance. A physical altercation is a liability. The moment Trent laid his hands on a guest inside my property, he transitioned from a fraudulent groom into an active security threat. I did not yell. I did not run across the marble floor to intervene. I maintained my position, ensuring my posture remained an anchor of executive calm. I shifted my gaze toward the thick architectural pillars flanking the entrance of the lobby. I issued a single, silent nod. The response was instantaneous. Two towering private security contractors, materialized from the shadows of the marble pillars. They did not wear the standard, ill-fitting uniforms of a generic guard service. They wore tailored black suits fitted over thick, muscular frames. Small, discreet communication earpieces rested in their ears. They were elite operatives employed directly by my hospitality portfolio, trained to neutralize threats with surgical, quiet efficiency. They moved across the floor with terrifying speed. Their leather shoes made almost no sound against the marble. They reached the frantic groom in a matter of seconds. They did not issue a verbal warning. They did not ask him to step back. They executed a strict physical containment protocol. The contractor on the left clamped his large hand onto the shoulder of the groom. The contractor on the right mirrored the action. Their grips were unyielding, digging into the fabric of the custom tuxedo with crushing kinetic force. Trent gasped as the sudden, overwhelming pressure halted his forward momentum. The customized pen slipped from his grasp, clattering loudly against the polished floorboards. The folded term sheet fluttered to the ground, landing near the expensive shoes of the billionaire. The security contractors pulled in unison. They hoisted Trent backward, their combined strength lifting him slightly off the ground. They physically separated the unhinged groom from the VIP guest, dragging him away from the venture capitalist and securing him in an inescapable, rigid hold. The private security contractors held Trent suspended inches above the polished floorboards. His imported leather shoes scraped against the marble, seeking a physical traction that no longer existed. The bespoke tuxedo he wore to project executive dominance betrayed him. The seams along his shoulders groaned under the strain, tearing with a sharp, audible rip that echoed across the silent room. He thrashed within the iron grips, twisting his torso, refusing to accept the sudden containment. He looked like a trapped animal caught in a snare. Stripped of his dignity and his manufactured charm, Trent did not surrender. He possessed a terminal lack of self-awareness. He kept his frantic eyes locked onto the billionaire, standing near the valet entrance. He ignored the tactical hold of the guards and directed his final, desperate pitch toward Marcus Thorne. "You are making a fatal error," Trent screamed, his voice a ragged, breathless scrape tearing from his throat. "My platform is a paradigm shift. I hold the proprietary algorithms. I possess the user acquisition models. If you walk out that door, you lose the definitive market advantage of the decade. I am handing you the future on a silver platter. This is your only opportunity to capture the sector. Sign the paper." He dangled between the two towering guards, spewing hollow tech buzzwords into the stagnant air. He believed the sheer volume of his voice could override the empirical reality of his ruin. He thought he could bully a billionaire into submission. Marcus Thorne stood near the dropped fountain pen and the discarded term sheet resting on the floor. The veteran investor did not flinch during the physical altercation. He possessed the cold, unshakable composure of a man who navigates global economic crashes and corporate hostile takeovers on a daily basis. He looked down at the customized pen near the toe of his expensive shoe, then raised his gaze to look at the sweating groom. Thorne did not issue a verbal reprimand. He did not shout for the authorities or threaten to press charges for the physical assault. He reached up with a calm, deliberate motion and smoothed the lapel of his dark charcoal suit. He brushed away the microscopic wrinkle caused by Trent grasping fingers. The gesture was profound in its simplicity. It communicated a lethal, unvarnished indifference. Thorne rendered the groom irrelevant without uttering a single syllable. The billionaire stepped over the fallen term sheet. He did not bend down to retrieve the contract. He left the paper on the floor, treating the document like discarded trash. Thorne walked past the struggling groom. The curated crowd of elite guests parted instinctively. The socialites and the groomsmen created a wide path for the venture capitalist. Stepping backward to avoid his shadow, the silence in the lobby amplified the steady, methodical cadence of his expensive shoes hitting the marble floorboards. He bypassed the weeping bride, standing near the floral archway. He ignored Richard and Caroline, who remained paralyzed near the cocktail alcove. He navigated the wreckage of the wedding reception with the detached curiosity of a tourist walking through an ancient ruin. He stopped directly in front of me. I maintained my position near the center of the room. I kept my hands resting at my sides. I did not adjust my posture or smooth the fabric of my understated charcoal dress. I looked at the towering figure of the venture capitalist. Thorne lowered his chin. He bowed his head in a precise replication of the deference Elias displayed 20 minutes prior. It was not a casual nod of acknowledgement. It was a formal gesture of profound, hierarchical respect, delivered by one of the most powerful financial titans on the East Coast. "Good evening," Thorne said. The deep, resonant baritone of his voice commanded the cavernous space, carrying effortlessly to the furthest corners of the grand lobby. "The perimeter is secure." The guests held their collective breath. Blair stared in bewildered shock, her tear-streaked face frozen in a mask of total incomprehension. Trent stopped thrashing against the security guards. His lungs hitched. He hung in the grips of the contractors, his eyes wide, watching the billionaire bow to the sister he just mocked at the front door. Thorne turned his head slightly, shifting his attention back to the restrained groom. The investor prepared to dismantle the final pillar of Trent fabricated reality. "You possess a fundamental misunderstanding of the venture capital ecosystem," Thorne stated. His words were sharp, striking the silent room like a gavel. "You spent 2 years courting me. You stalked my itineraries, attended the same charity galas, and bribed concierges to access my private dining rooms. You did all of this to pitch a hollow algorithm, assuming my public profile equated to unilateral authority." Trent swallowed hard, a wet, audible click echoing in his throat. "You thought my signature alone could authorize an 8-figure cash injection," Thorne continued, dissecting the delusion. "You believed you were negotiating with the apex of the pyramid. You failed to realize that the men who put their names on building facades and press releases are rarely the architects of the capital." Thorne paced a single step to the right, opening his stance to ensure the crowd grasped the lesson. "I manage the optics," Thorne explained, revealing the hidden architecture of the financial sector. "I negotiate the preliminary terms. I serve as the public's face of the fund to field desperate pitches from individuals exactly like you. I absorb the risk and maintain the public relations. But I do not hold the checkbook." Trent stared at the billionaire, his mind fracturing as the truth set in. The man he begged for salvation was merely a sophisticated gatekeeper. "I represent a shadow syndicate," Thorne announced, the chilling revelation echoing against the vaulted glass ceilings. "The true liquidity, the billions of dollars funding the technology sector, resides with a private board of directors. Those individuals prefer strict anonymity over magazine covers. They operate in the dark, shielding their identities from the relentless demands of the market. They deploy me to filter the noise." Thorne turned back to face me. He extended an open palm in my direction, shifting the entire axis of power within the lobby. He directed the attention of the room toward the woman wearing the modest dress. "You spent 24 months begging me for a lifeline," Thorne informed the sweating groom, his voice dropping into a freezing, lethal register. "You should have spent that time cultivating a different relationship. You mocked the wrong guest upon arrival." Trent let out a soft, choked gasp. He looked at my face, processing the proximity of his salvation and the magnitude of his fatal error. "I cannot sign your term sheet because I do not possess the final authorization," Thorne concluded, delivering the ultimate execution of the corporate dream. "I report to the Chairwoman." Thorne gestured toward me one final time, cementing the new reality into the minds of every person standing in the room. "Allow me to introduce the anonymous primary stakeholder of the exact venture capital firm you spent 2 years courting," Thorne declared, the payoff hitting the crowd with devastating kinetic force. "She controls the majority voting shares. She dictates the deployment of the capital. She holds the ultimate veto power over our entire investment portfolio. Your survival was always in her hands." The jaw of the restrained groom dropped. His mouth hung open in a silent, pathetic oval, He stared at me, his eyes wide and unblinking, as his brain short-circuited under the weight of the revelation. The cognitive dissonance paralyzed him. He spent the last 2 years treating my existence as a punchline to entertain his hollow friends. He mocked my modest wardrobe. He belittled my corporate career. He leveraged the money he stole from my parents to project an illusion of unassailable superiority. Convinced he was the smartest entity in any room, he assumed my quiet nature indicated weakness. He failed to comprehend that true power rarely announces itself. The corporate drone he insulted at the front door was the elusive billionaire he spent his entire adult life trying to impress. He hung suspended between the two towering security contractors, unable to form a single coherent word. The bespoke tuxedo he wore to project executive dominance now resembled a straitjacket. The elite socialites standing nearby physically recoiled. They shifted away from the groom in synchronized horror, treating him like an active contagion. Nobody wanted to stand adjacent to a man who just committed professional suicide in front of the most powerful venture capitalist on the eastern seaboard. The curated aesthetic of the evening fractured beyond repair. I did not smile. A predator does not gloat when the steel trap finally snaps shut. I took a measured step across the polished marble floor. My heels clicked against the stone. A slow, rhythmic cadence that measured the final seconds of his corporate existence. I closed the physical distance between us. Bypassing the discarded term sheet Thorne ignored on the floor, I stopped an arm length away from the sweating groom. His chest heaved in a frantic, irregular rhythm. He smelled of stale cologne and raw fear. He tried to speak, his vocal cords straining to produce a pathetic apology or a desperate excuse. But the words died in his dry throat. He realized apologies hold zero currency in my boardroom. I reached into my structured leather clutch. I bypassed my smartphone and retrieved a folded document of my own. I held the heavy parchment between my index finger and my thumb, keeping it elevated so the surrounding crowd could witness the impending execution. I did not need Thorne to retrieve the contract from the floor. I already possessed the exact legal paperwork required to finalize the transaction. As the chairwoman of the Shadow Syndicate, I review every preliminary pitch submitted to my desk. I informed the captive groom. My voice carried a low, freezing resonance that cut through the lingering silence of the grand lobby. Thorne forwarded your technical proposal to my secure server 3 weeks ago. You claimed your platform featured a proprietary algorithm capable of disrupting the global wealth management sector. You promised revolutionary user acquisition metrics. You requested an initial funding round of $20 million to scale the operation. I flicked my wrist, allowing the pages of the term sheet to unfold. The crisp white paper caught the dim ambient light. I reviewed your source code, I stated, dissecting the core foundation of his lie. I employ a dedicated team of forensic software engineers. They strip every application down to the baseline architecture before I authorize a single wire transfer. They spent 4 days analyzing your developmental framework. Trent squeezed his eyes shut. The empirical autopsy of his technology left him with 0 avenues of retreat. He assumed venture capitalists threw cash at any charismatic founder wearing a luxury watch. He never anticipated a forensic audit of his digital infrastructure. He hoped the illusion of his wealth would blind the board of directors. You do not own a proprietary algorithm, I revealed, exposing the technical fraud to the silent room. You licensed a generic open-source framework and wrapped it in a flashy graphic interface. Your user acquisition models rely on predatory subscription traps designed to inflate active user counts without generating actual revenue. Your backend security protocols fail basic compliance standards. Your entire startup is a digital mirage designed to siphon investor capital into your personal bank accounts. A paper contract holds immense power in the financial sector, but it is still just a piece of paper. I did not intend to tear the document with my bare hands. Tearing paper is an emotional response, a display of raw frustration or sudden anger. I operate with cold, mechanical efficiency. I offered a subtle glance over my shoulder toward the cocktail alcove. Maya stepped forward. My sister-in-law understood the assignment perfectly. She abandoned her position near the wall and joined me in the center of the lobby. She did not carry the federal compliance audit anymore. She held a sleek, rectangular device constructed from matte black polycarbonate. The machine was a portable, battery-operated digital shredder. It was a specialized tool utilized by federal compliance officers for secure, immediate document disposal during on-site regulatory raids. She pressed a small toggle switch on the side of the casing. A low, menacing hum filled the quiet space as the mechanical steel blades spun to life. The sound was sharp and industrial, a stark contrast to the romantic venue. Maya held the device steady, presenting the intake slot like an open grave waiting to consume his future. I looked at Trent, ensuring his eyes were open. I forced him to witness the physical manifestation of his ruin. He tried to thrash against the guards one last time, a pathetic twitch of his shoulders, but the security contractors held him rigid. He could not look away. I aligned the bottom edge of the term sheet with the narrow slot of the machine. I released my grip. The mechanical blades caught the heavy parchment. The shredder whirred louder, consuming the legal contract with ruthless speed. Trent let out a breathless whimper as he watched the signature line disappear into the polycarbonate casing. The machine chewed through the proprietary claims, the equity divisions, and the fabricated user projections. A stream of thin, meaningless white strips cascaded out of the bottom exhaust port. The shredded paper fluttered down to the marble floor, landing in a chaotic pile near the ruined leather shoes of the groom. The cash injection he desperately needed to avoid federal prison, the lifeline he spent 2 years chasing, was reduced to confetti in a matter of seconds. Maya clicked the power button, silencing the hum of the blades. The quiet echo of the lobby returned, heavier and colder than before. Trent stared at the pile of shredded paper. His breathing slowed into a hollow, defeated rhythm. He possessed no backup plan. He burned every bridge, stole every dollar from his future in-laws, and alienated every legitimate contact in his network for this single, catastrophic gamble. The gamble failed. I took a final step closer, invading his personal space. I dropped my voice to a lethal whisper that only he and the nearby groomsmen could hear. Destroying a term sheet is a standard protocol for rejected pitches, I explained. But you crossed a distinct line tonight. You attempted to physically assault my chief representative. You defrauded my family. You utilized my hospitality estate as a theatrical stage to execute a scam. I leaned in, delivering the ultimate sentence. I do not just decline your proposal. I dictate the flow of capital across the eastern seaboard. I sit on the advisory boards of the top-tier financial institutions. I share intelligence with every major equity fund in this country. Tomorrow morning, your name, your face, and your fraudulent source code will be distributed across a secure, encrypted network. Trent swallowed hard, a single tear cutting through the sweat on his cheek. You are permanently blacklisted from every venture capital firm, every angel investor syndicate, and every private equity group on the East Coast. I informed him, driving the final nail into his coffin. No one will ever read your emails. No one will ever take your phone calls. No bank will ever approve a commercial loan under your signature. You will never secure another meeting in this industry for the rest of your natural life. Your startup is officially dead. The thin white strips of shredded paper rested on the polished marble floorboards like artificial snow. The mechanical hum of the digital disposal device faded, leaving behind a profound, suffocating quiet. Trent hung limply between the two security contractors, his custom tuxedo torn, his breathing reduced to a hollow, erratic wheeze. His corporate future, his fabricated identity, and his lifeline to the venture capital syndicate were eradicated. He possessed nothing. He controlled nothing. While the groom surrendered to the gravity of his ruin, the social dynamics within the grand lobby began to shift. The curated audience of elite guests processed the sheer scale of the wealth I just unveiled. I did not just own the premier hospitality estate. I controlled the venture capital pipeline. I held the keys to the financial kingdom they all worshipped. A sudden rustle of imported silk broke the tension. Caroline stepped out from the shadows near the cocktail alcove. My mother witnessed the forensic execution of the golden son-in-law. 30 minutes ago, she pointed a manicured finger at my chest, calling me a petty, jealous sibling. She demanded I absorb the cost of a luxury reception to protect her fragile social standing. But Caroline operated on a primal, parasitic instinct. She possessed a terrifying ability to rewrite her own reality the moment the power dynamic shifted. She looked at Trent, the man she defended just moments prior. She did not offer him a glance of pity. She saw a sinking ship, a federal suspect carrying immense legal liability. Caroline severed her loyalty to him with the speed of a guillotine. She turned her gaze toward me. Her facial expression morphed in real time. The unhinged indignation melted away, replaced by a sickening, manufactured warmth. She smoothed the front of her designer gown and walked across the floor. She bypassed the weeping bride. Ignoring Blair entirely, Caroline focused her predatory attention on the true source of capital in the room. "Harper," Caroline murmured, her voice dripping with a saccharine sweetness that made my skin crawl. She closed the distance, extending her arms as if she intended to pull me into a maternal embrace. I took a single, deliberate step backward. I raised my hand, holding my palm flat to establish a rigid physical boundary. Caroline stopped, dropping her arms, but the grotesque smile remained plastered across her face. "I always knew you possessed a brilliant mind," Caroline cooed, attempting a psychological pivot so audacious it bordered on delusion. She tilted her head, performing the role of a proud parent. "You were always the analytical one. While other girls played with trivial things, you studied the markets. You built an empire in silence. It is truly remarkable." I kept my face impassive, observing the rapid recalibration of her loyalties. She praised my business acumen not out of genuine respect, but because she viewed my net worth as an untapped reservoir of personal funding. "You saved us," Caroline declared, gesturing toward the captive groom with a flick of her wrist. "You exposed this criminal before he could drag our family name into a federal indictment. You stepped in and protected us. That is what a strong, successful daughter does." She took another step closer, lowering her voice into a conspiratorial whisper, attempting to forge an exclusive alliance right in front of the stunned guests. "We are the victims here," Caroline rationalized, weaving a new narrative to shield her ego. "Trent manipulated our trust. He stole our home equity. He drained the retirement funds your father spent 30 years building. We are facing financial devastation through no fault of our own." Her eyes darted down to the structured leather clutch in my hand, then scanned the luxurious details of the lobby. She did the mental math, calculating the limitless resources of a venture capital chairwoman. "But you possess the capacity to fix this?" Caroline demanded, the sweet facade cracking just enough to reveal the demanding entitlement beneath. "A woman in your position, a billionaire, can resolve a simple housing crisis with a single phone call. You can purchase a new property for us, a luxury condominium in the financial district, or perhaps a gated estate in the northern suburbs. You can absorb the loss Trent caused." She reached out, attempting to touch the sleeve of my charcoal dress. "Family supports family. Harper," Caroline pitched, weaponizing the concept of blood relation. "We gave you everything. We provided a beautiful home in Connecticut. We funded your education. Now, in our twilight years, we need you to step up. Use your portfolio to secure our future. It is the right thing to do." I looked at the woman who spent 3 decades making me feel like an unwelcome guest in my own childhood home. I remembered the cold, dismissive glances across the dinner table. I remembered the holidays where my achievements were brushed aside to celebrate the superficial milestones of the golden child. She enabled a toxic dynamic, prioritized aesthetics over character, and blindly funded a con artist because he drove a leased sports car. Now, facing the consequences of her superficial metrics, She expected me to function as an automated teller machine. I did not raise my voice. True dominance requires no volume. You possess a staggering capacity for revisionist history, I stated, my words slicing through her maternal performance like a scalpel. You did not provide a home. You provided a fortress of impossible expectations. You did not support my ambition. You mocked my career until the exact second you realized my career could purchase your survival. Caroline flinched. The fake smile trembled on her lips. She looked around the lobby, suddenly aware that the elite socialites were hanging on my every word, witnessing the public rejection of her demands. I am not your safety net, I informed her, ensuring the boundary was cast in iron. I do not subsidize the lifestyles of individuals who treat my existence as an administrative burden. I will not purchase a luxury condominium to house your ego. I will not wire a single dollar to cover the deficit created by your blind loyalty to a fraud. Richard stepped out from the cocktail alcove, moving to stand beside his wife. The patriarch looked pale and haggard. He recognized the unyielding finality in my tone. He understood that the venture capital chairwoman standing before him was immune to parental guilt. Harper, please, Richard rasped, his voice devoid of its usual booming authority. If you do not help us, the bank takes the house. We have nowhere to go. We are out of time. You ran out of time 3 months ago, I corrected him, shifting my gaze to my father. I turned my back on Trent and the security guards, focusing my attention solely on the architecture of their domestic ruin. When you signed that silent second mortgage and handed the lump sum of cash to Trent, you initiated a binding financial contract, I explained, walking them through the sterile mechanics of the banking sector. Trent took the $500,000 to pay off his litigation debts, but the bank did not care where the money went. The bank only cared about the monthly premium. You are still legally obligated to service the debt you leveraged against your property. Richard dropped his gaze to the floor. He knew the math. Your retirement income could not cover the original mortgage and the new, exorbitant secondary premium, I stated, laying out the timeline. You drained your savings accounts trying to keep the illusion alive. You floated the debt for the first month. I took a slow, deliberate step toward my parents. But you missed the payment in the second month, I continued. And you missed the payment in the third month. You missed 3 consecutive billing cycles. Caroline let out a soft, terrified gasp. The guests in the lobby murmured, the reality of the parental default becoming public knowledge. Financial institutions operate on algorithms, not emotion, I explained. When a borrower misses 3 consecutive payments on a high-yield secondary mortgage, the system categorizes the asset as toxic debt. The bank does not call you to negotiate. The bank moves to eliminate the liability from their ledgers. They place the toxic debt onto a distressed asset registry and auction it to private equity firms. Richard looked up, his eyes wide with sudden, chilling comprehension. He understood the trajectory of the conversation. I monitor the distressed asset registries, I revealed, my voice echoing with lethal precision. I track the default rates in the affluent suburbs. 2 weeks ago, the address of my childhood home appeared on the auction block. The bank was selling the paper on your house for pennies on the dollar to recoup their losses. Caroline reached a trembling hand out, grasping the sleeve of her husband. She thought I was telling a story of salvation. She thought I monitored the registries to protect them. You bought it, Caroline whispered, a desperate spark of hope reigniting in her eyes. You paid the bank. You hold the mortgage. I unlatched the brass clasp of my slim, leather briefcase for the second time tonight. I did not purchase the debt under my own name, I clarified, reaching inside the dark interior. I utilized a private equity proxy firm, an anonymous holding shell designed to acquire distressed real estate without leaving a personal footprint. I extracted a crisp, formal legal document. It did not bear a municipal stamp. It bore the unyielding black ink of a corporate litigation firm. I purchased the debt, I confirmed, holding the document by the edge. But I did not purchase it to grant you a grace period. I acquired the asset to execute the terms of the contract you violated. I extended my arm, pressing the heavy paper directly into the trembling hands of my mother. Caroline looked down at the document. The bold, capitalized letters at the top of the page seemed to burn into her retinas. That is a formal notice of foreclosure, I announced, ensuring the acoustic resonance of the lobby carried the phrase to every single guest. I executed the claim this morning. I own the deed to your property. My private security contractors are scheduled to change the locks on the colonial home at dawn. You do not just lack a retirement fund. You lack a residence. You are officially evicted. The formal notice of foreclosure rested in the trembling hands of my mother. Richard stared at the black ink printed on the legal parchment, the reality of his impending eviction rendering the patriarch mute. The elite socialites in the lobby absorbed the brutal execution of the suburban dynasty. I expected tears. I expected Caroline to collapse onto the marble floorboards, or Richard to beg for a secondary grace period to save the home he spent 30 years building. I expected the bride to rush forward and console the parents who just lost their primary residence to fund her extravagant wedding. But the golden child did not look at her parents. Blair did not care about the colonial home in Connecticut. She did not shed a tear over the financial ruin of the groom standing a few feet away. Her flawless bridal facade fractured. But the panic radiating from her rigid posture originated from a distinct, separate source. Blair stood near the towering floral archway, her face illuminated by the harsh, blue glow of her smartphone screen. Her thumbs moved across the digital glass with frantic, erratic speed. During the forensic dismantling of the groom, the curated guest list realized the luxury reception was a dead enterprise. Deprived of vintage champagne and a 5-course dinner, the elite socialites turned to their secondary instinct. They became digital spectators. Dozens of guests held their phones at chest level, recording the lobby disaster in real time. Blair let out a piercing, unhinged shriek. The sound tore through the quiet tension of the grand lobby, forcing the groomsmen to flinch. She lunged forward, her custom silk gown tangling around her ankles. She raised her glowing smartphone in the air like a drawn weapon. "Look at this," Blair shrieked, her voice cracking under the weight of pure vanity. She pointed the screen toward the crowd, though no one could read the fast-scrolling text. The wedding hashtag is trending. People are uploading videos of the catering staff packing up the bar. They are posting clips of Trent being restrained by the security guards. The entire internet is watching my reception fall apart. For an individual who measured her self-worth in digital engagement and curated aesthetics, a viral humiliation constituted a fatal wound. Blair ignored the federal indictments hovering over her groom and the foreclosure notices handed to her parents. She focused entirely on the optics of her brand. She marched across the marble floorboards, closing the physical distance between us. Her tear-streaked face twisted into a mask of pure, venomous entitlement. She stopped a few feet away from me. She held her phone up, tapping the screen to initiate a live broadcast application. The red recording indicator pulsed in the dim, ambient light of the lobby. "You think you won because you hold the deeds to some real estate," Blair sneered, aiming the camera lens directly at my face. "You think owning this venue gives you the authority to ruin my milestone. You forgot who I am. You forgot the digital ecosystem I control." She angled the phone, ensuring her ruined bridal makeup and the opulent architectural background of the estate filled the frame. "I possess over 1 million followers," Blair threatened, projecting her voice to ensure the microphone captured every word. "I am a premier lifestyle influencer. My audience trusts my recommendations. They book the hotels I feature. They purchase the products I endorse. I hold the power to destroy the reputation of any business I choose." She lowered the phone slightly, locking her frantic eyes onto mine. "I am going to go live right now," Blair promised, her tone dripping with vindictive certainty. "I am going to tell my 1 million followers that the Oakhaven Estate is a fraudulent, hostile venue. I will instruct my audience to leave catastrophic reviews on every single corporate directory. I will tank your search engine optimization. I will weaponize my digital influence until your pristine hospitality portfolio bleeds capital. I will make sure no bride ever books a reception at this estate again. I stood under the vaulted glass ceilings and looked at the glowing lens of her smartphone. The threat of a coordinated social media boycott holds genuine weight in the modern corporate sector. A mobilized digital army can severely damage the public relations architecture of a luxury brand. Blair believed she held the ultimate trump card. She thought her virtual kingdom granted her immunity from the physical consequences unfolding in the real world. I did not raise my hand to block the camera lens. I did not order the security contractors to confiscate her device. I simply looked over my shoulder. Maya stepped out from the shadows near the locked ballroom doors. As a senior compliance director for a federal watchdog, my sister-in-law did not just audit bank accounts and track stolen mortgages. Financial fraud in the modern era requires rigorous digital forensics. Scammers operate online, utilizing virtual assets to launder money and project false authority. Maya tracked digital footprints with the exact same lethal precision she used to dismantle fraudulent brokerage firms. Maya did not carry the portable digital shredder. She held a sleek, synchronized smart tablet. She walked past the paralyzed parents and approached the center of the lobby. She did not look at the glowing lens of the smartphone. She focused her attention on a large, high-definition smart screen mounted on the wall near the coat check alcove. The venue typically utilized the monitor to display interactive seating charts or welcome videos for incoming guests. Maya tapped the glass surface of her tablet. The digital interface of the wall-mounted smart screen flickered to life. The display cast a bright, clinical light across the polished marble floor. You claim to possess a digital ecosystem of 1 million loyal followers, Maya stated, her voice calm, echoing through the quiet lobby. You threaten to weaponize an army of devoted fans to dismantle this real estate portfolio. Maya swiped her index finger across the tablet. The wall-mounted screen illuminated with a complex array of back-end data analytics, high-contrast graphs, geographic heat maps, and stark statistical columns filled the display. The raw data laid bare the hidden architecture of a digital profile. An influencer with a genuine audience generates consistent engagement metrics, Maya explained, acting as a clinical narrator for the autopsy of a digital brand. A healthy profile displays a logical ratio of likes, comments, and authentic user interactions based on geographic relevance. Maya tapped a specific column on her device. A bright red graph spiked on the wall monitor. Your engagement metrics fail every basic authenticity test, Maya revealed, drawing the eyes of every socialite and groomsman to the glowing screen. Your follower count sits at 1.2 million. Yet, your average post generates less than 400 authentic comments. The disparity is mathematically impossible for an organic audience. Blair lowered her smartphone. The red recording indicator continued to pulse, but her hand trembled. The vindictive certainty began to drain from her pale face. I ran a deep diagnostic sweep on your social media accounts this afternoon, Maya continued, her words functioning as a digital guillotine. I traced the internet protocol addresses of your audience. The geographic heat map on the screen shifted, illuminating dense clusters of data points in regions entirely disconnected from the luxury lifestyle sector. 90% of your audience originates from automated server farms located in Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia, Maya announced, exposing the raw truth. They are not loyal fans. They are not prospective brides looking for venue recommendations. They are lines of synthetic code. You possess over 1 million purchased bot accounts. The guests in the lobby gasped. The illusion of the golden child, the premier lifestyle influencer, evaporated into thin air. Blair shook her head, a pathetic gesture of denial. She took a step back, her custom silk gown brushing against the floorboards. That is a lie, Blair stammered, her voice weak and hollow. I built my brand from scratch. I cultivated my audience over years of hard work. I never bought a single follower. Maya did not argue. She tapped her tablet one final time. The screen transitioned from demographic graphs to a stark, undeniable financial ledger. Bot farms do not operate for free, Maya stated. Tracing the flow of capital. Maintaining an artificial audience of that magnitude requires a constant, heavy stream of monthly subscription payments. The server farms charge premium rates to bypass the security algorithms of the social media platforms. The ledger on the screen displayed a series of recurring wire transfers. The sums were staggering. Thousands of dollars routed to offshore accounts every single month to keep the artificial follower count inflated. You did not pay for those bots, Maya clarified, looking directly at the weeping bride. You do not generate enough revenue from your sparse brand sponsorships to cover the baseline operational cost of your own illusion. Maya shifted her gaze toward the captive groom hanging between the two security contractors. Trent kept his chin pressed against his chest, unable to meet the eyes of his bride. The wire transfers originated from a shadow shell company managed by the groom, Maya revealed, delivering the ultimate, devastating connection. Blair let out a choked, breathless sound. She looked at Trent, the reality of the financial web tightening around her throat. When Trent manipulated your parents into signing a silent second mortgage, he did not use all the stolen home equity to pay off his old litigation debts, Maya explained, the pieces of the puzzle snapping into a flawless, lethal picture. He took a significant portion of that stolen cash and routed it into the offshore bot farms. He purchased your follower count. He funded your digital aesthetic to ensure you remained compliant, distracted, and loyal to his fabricated wealth. The silence in the lobby became absolute. The ambient noise vanished. Richard and Caroline stared at their daughter in pure horror, realizing the equity from their home was not lost in a bad market trade, but burned to buy fake internet popularity. Your parents lost their colonial home to buy your fake audience, Maya concluded, her voice ringing with cold finality. You cannot destroy the reputation of this venue because you possess zero actual influence. You are screaming into an empty room. Your entire digital kingdom is a purchased lie. The glowing data on the smart screen illuminated the sheer depth of the betrayal. Richard and Caroline stared at the scrolling ledger of offshore wire transfers, realizing their stolen home equity funded a phantom audience. Blair dropped her phone. The device clattered against the marble floor, the cracked screen reflecting the ruined aesthetic of her bridal gown. The golden child possessed 0 followers, 0 influence, and 0 leverage. She was a hollow shell, propped up by the criminal funds of the man standing a few feet away. Trent hung between the two private security contractors. The torn seams of his custom tuxedo exposed the white fabric of his undershirt. His breathing sounded like a rusted engine. He watched the billionaire walk out. He watched the term sheet turn into confetti. He watched his bride dissolve into a puddle of tears. The groom calculated his remaining options. He possessed no financial escape hatch. The federal compliance audit resting in Maya's hands guaranteed an impending legal nightmare. The foreclosure document ensured he had no luxury penthouse to retreat toward. His only viable strategy was physical extraction. He needed to break the tactical hold of the security guards, sprint through the front doors, and disappear into the city before the authorities arrived. But he could not overpower the towering operatives alone. He needed kinetic backup. He needed numbers. Trent turned his head, twisting his neck against the rigid grip of the contractors. He looked toward the coat check alcove. 6 men stood in a neat, symmetrical line. They wore matching slate-gray tuxedos, identical silver neckties, and imported leather shoes. They sported crisp haircuts and square jawlines, projecting the exact image of successful, elite fraternity brothers. Throughout the evening, they played the role of the devoted groomsmen. They handed Trent his champagne, laughed loudly at his hollow jokes, and posed for the professional photographer with practiced ease. They functioned as the ultimate social accessory, validating his status to the curated guest list. Trent locked his frantic eyes onto the man standing at the front of the group, the individual playing the role of the best man. "Get over here," Trent barked, his voice cracking under the strain of his panic. He attempted to project the commanding aura of a wronged executive. Do not just stand there. These guards are executing an illegal detainment. This venue owner is having a psychotic break. Form a wedge and push them back. Break this hold so we can walk out the front door. Trent expected an immediate display of masculine loyalty. He anticipated the 6 men rushing forward, using their combined body weight to overwhelm the 2 security contractors. He relied on the unspoken code of brotherhood he pretended to share with them. The 6 men in the matching tuxedos did not move a single muscle. They kept their hands at their sides. They did not shout defensive threats at the security team. They did not rush to the aid of the struggling groom. They watched him dangle with the detached, bored expression of commuters waiting for a delayed train. "What are you doing?" Trent yelled, his face flushing a deep, mottled red. "We went to business school together. We closed the offshore accounts together. We built the firm from the ground up. You are my groomsmen. Get over here and do your job." He fed the crowd a desperate narrative, trying to force the men to adhere to the fictional history he authored. He needed the elite socialites in the lobby to believe he commanded a loyal inner circle. The man playing the best man let out a long, heavy sigh. The sound carried across the quiet lobby, deflating the tense atmosphere. The posture of the man shifted. He dropped the rigid, upright stance of a wealthy tech executive. His shoulders slumped. He rolled his neck, stretching the cramped muscles. He transformed from an elite socialite into a tired gig worker at the end of a very long shift. He raised his right hand to the lapel of his slate-gray tuxedo. His fingers grasped the stem of the imported white orchid boutonniere pinned to the fabric. With a swift, uncaring motion, he unpinned the floral arrangement. He tossed the delicate flower onto a bare wooden cocktail table. The orchid landed with a soft, dismissive thud. The action severed the invisible tether between the groom and his bridal party. "We did not go to business school with you," the man stated. His voice lacked the polished, arrogant inflection he utilized during the cocktail hour. He spoke with the flat, weary cadence of a working-class citizen. "We did not build a brokerage firm. We do not know anything about your offshore accounts." Trent opened his mouth to scream another order, but the words died in his throat. The man reached up and loosened his silver necktie, pulling the silk knot down to let his neck breathe. He looked around the grand lobby, addressing the stunned crowd of guests instead of the groom. "We are not his friends," the man announced, his words ringing clear and sharp under the vaulted glass ceilings. "We are struggling actors. We are registered with a background casting agency based in the theater district." The elite guests exchanged bewildered glances. The illusion of the popular, well-connected visionary evaporated into thin air. Trent did not just fake his financial portfolio and his diamond engagement ring. He faked his human connections. "He hired us 3 weeks ago through an anonymous corporate proxy," the actor explained, walking the crowd through the transactional nature of their presence. The contract required 6 men of specific height and build to wear these rented tuxedos, stand near the altar, and pretend to laugh at his jokes. He paid a premium hourly rate to ensure we memorized a fake backstory about attending a prestigious university together. The actor turned his gaze back to the sweating groom. "You did not hire a casting agency because you wanted a specific aesthetic," the man said, delivering the psychological autopsy of the groom. "You hired us because you possess 0 legitimate colleagues. You burned every bridge in your professional network. You defaulted on loans from your former partners. You lied to every associate who ever trusted you. When it came time to stand at the altar, you could not find 6 real men willing to stand beside you. You had to purchase the illusion of loyalty." Trent squeezed his eyes shut. A single tear of pure humiliation cut a track through the sweat on his cheek. The public exposure of his social isolation stung worse than the financial ruin. He was a predator who manipulated everyone in his orbit, leaving him stranded on an island of his own making. "The hourly rate on our contract expired 10 minutes ago," the actor stated, checking a cheap digital watch hidden beneath the cuff of his rented tuxedo. "And hazard pay for engaging in a physical altercation with elite private security is not included in our union guidelines. We are off the clock." The other 5 actors mirrored his movements. They unpinned their white orchid boutonnieres and dropped them onto the floor. They loosened their ties. They discarded the uniform of the fake fraternity. The 6 men turned their backs on the captive groom. They walked in unison toward the heavy glass doors at the front entrance of the estate. They did not look back. They pushed the doors open, stepping out into the cool night air, leaving the ruined reception behind them. The glass doors swung shut, sealing the lobby. Trent hung between the towering security guards. The floral boutonnieres littered the floor around him. He possessed no bride, no investors, no parents to steal from, and no friends to shield him. He was entirely, fundamentally alone. He waited for the final blow, knowing he possessed zero armor left to absorb the impact. The heavy glass doors at the front entrance of the estate swung shut, sealing the grand lobby. The 6 background actors disappeared into the cool night air, taking the final shred of the groom-fabricated reality with them. The discarded white orchid boutonnieres littered the polished marble floorboards, trampled under the expensive leather shoes of the captive. Trent hung between the 2 private security contractors. He possessed no bride to shield him, no venture capitalists to fund him, and no fake fraternity brothers to validate his existence. The room fell into a stagnant, unforgiving quiet, save for the ragged sound of his failing respiratory rhythm, while the groom surrendered to his total isolation. A different psychological collapse occurred a few feet away. Richard stood near the cocktail alcove. The patriarch of the family held the formal notice of foreclosure in his trembling hands. For 30 years, he defined his worth by the square footage of his suburban colonial home, the manicured green lawn, and the illusion of unassailable financial security. He projected the image of a savvy investor, a man who could spot a lucrative opportunity from a mile away. When Trent arrived in a leased sports car and pitched a secret expansion for his boutique brokerage, Richard felt validated. He thought he was buying a seat at the table of the next billionaire. He handed over $500,000 of home equity, bypassing all logic, driven entirely by ego and greed. Richard looked down at the black ink printed on the legal document. The words outlined his impending eviction. He shifted his gaze from the paper to the sweating groom dangling in the grip of the security team. The cognitive dissonance shattered. Richard realized the man standing before him was not a visionary technology founder experiencing a temporary cash flow disruption. Trent was a sociopathic con artist who weaponized the vanity of an aging man to pay off litigation debts. Richard realized he sacrificed his twilight years, his shelter, and his dignity to fund offshore bot farms and a fake diamond. The golden son-in-law transformed into the architect of his total destruction. A primal, unfiltered rage ignited within the chest of the patriarch. Richard dropped the foreclosure document. The heavy parchment fluttered to the marble floor. He let out a visceral, guttural roar that tore through the quiet lobby, startling the elite socialites and forcing Caroline to step backward. The sophisticated facade of the suburban father evaporated. He lunged across the open floor space. Richard was not a trained fighter. He was an aging man accustomed to golf courses and corporate boardrooms. His charge lacked tactical grace. His formal tuxedo jacket flapped wildly as he sprinted the short distance. He lowered his shoulder, driving his body weight forward, fueled by the sheer adrenaline of a man who just lost everything he owned. Trent saw him coming. The groom widened his eyes, a fresh wave of terror washing over his pale face. But the security contractors held his arms pinned behind his back. Trent possessed zero ability to block the incoming strike. Richard collided with the groom. The impact generated a dull, heavy thud. The momentum carried both men downward. The security contractors maintained their tactical grips, riding the fall to the floor to ensure the captive did not escape the hold. Richard landed on top of Trent. A brief, pathetic scuffle broke out on the polished marble. The altercation contained no cinematic heroism. It was an ugly, chaotic display of 2 broken men tearing at each other in the ruins of their shared deceit. Richard grabbed the lapels of the ruined bespoke tuxedo. He shook the groom back and forth, his knuckles turning white from the strain. He threw a clumsy, wild punch that grazed the cheekbone of the younger man. "You stole my house?" Richard screamed, his face a mask of purple fury. Saliva flew from his lips, landing on the torn fabric of the groom. "You took my retirement. You ruined my family. I trusted you. I vouched for you. Give me my money back. Give me my house back right now." Trent cowered against the hard floorboards. He twisted his face away to avoid the sloppy strikes, whimpering as the older man continued to shake him. He offered no defense and no apology. The physical chaos lasted less than 10 seconds. The security operatives employed by my hospitality portfolio operate with strict, unforgiving efficiency. They allowed the initial impact to neutralize the remaining kinetic energy of the groom. But they did not tolerate a prolonged brawl inside a premier venue. The towering contractor on the left released his grip on Trent. He reached forward and grabbed Richard by the collar of his tuxedo jacket. The operative hoisted the raging patriarch off the floor with staggering ease, peeling him away from the groom like a nuisance. The second contractor stepped in, pressing a flat palm against the chest of my father, driving him backward. "Stand down," the operative ordered, his voice a low, mechanical drone that brooked zero argument. Richard stumbled backward, his dress shoes slipping on the marble. He hit the edge of a bare wooden cocktail table, gasping for breath. The fight drained the last reserves of his energy. He clutched his chest, his shoulders heaving, his face slick with sweat. He looked down at his own trembling hands, realizing the physical outburst accomplished nothing. He could not beat his home equity back into existence. The security guards hauled Trent back to his feet. The groom possessed a red, swelling mark on his left cheekbone. His tuxedo was beyond repair, the fabric hanging in shredded strips. He looked like a casualty of war dragged from a battlefield. The lobby fell into a tense, heavy silence. The socialites stared at the aftermath of the scuffle, their eyes wide, their champagne flutes forgotten long ago. The elite networking event deteriorated into a visceral display of criminal exposure and domestic collapse. Maya stepped forward. My sister-in-law did not retreat into the shadows during the physical altercation. She stood her ground near the center of the room, her tailored emerald suit unwrinkled, her posture radiating unwavering authority. She observed the pathetic fight with the clinical detachment of a federal regulator watching a fraudulent enterprise consume itself. She walked toward the center of the lobby, ensuring she captured the attention of every person remaining in the venue. She focused her gaze on the bleeding groom and the hyperventilating father. "You operate under the assumption that this exposure ends tonight," Maya stated. Her voice cut through the heavy silence, crisp and precise. "You believe the worst consequence of your deceit is a canceled wedding reception, a shredded term sheet, and a foreclosed home." Maya lowered her synchronized smart tablet, letting her hands rest at her sides. "A corporate compliance audit is not an internal reprimand," Maya explained, outlining the unyielding mechanics of her profession. "I do not track stolen mortgages, offshore bot farms, and leveraged margin defaults just to humiliate you in front of a curated guest list. My division does not issue simple fines for the scale of systemic fraud you committed." Trent lifted his head. His breath hitched. He stared at the African-American woman standing before him, his mind struggling to process the trajectory of her words. "When I finalized the forensic diagnostic on your boutique brokerage firm this morning, I did not just freeze your domestic accounts," Maya revealed, dismantling his final illusion of safety. "I compiled the digital ledgers. I bundled the wire transfer receipts detailing your offshore transactions. I attached the forged loan applications you used to steal the home equity from your future in-laws." She took a slow, deliberate step toward the restrained groom. "I forwarded the entire unredacted dossier to the criminal division of the federal authorities at dawn today," Maya announced. The disclosure landed with the weight of a judge dropping a gavel. Trent opened his mouth, a silent gasp escaping his throat. He realized the compliance director did not just ruin his wedding. She orchestrated his legal execution. We do not negotiate with predators who use real estate equity to fund synthetic digital empires, Maya continued, her tone dropping into a freezing register. We eradicate them from the financial ecosystem. A faint sound echoed in the distance. The noise originated from outside the heavy glass doors of the grand lobby. It started as a low, indistinct wail, cutting through the quiet night air of the sprawling estate. Within seconds, the sound amplified. The sharp, rising pitch of multiple sirens pierced the thick architectural glass of the venue. The flashing red and blue emergency strobes began to reflect off the manicured botanical gardens outside, painting the dark windows in harsh, rhythmic bursts of color. The sirens grew deafening, echoing up the long, private gravel driveway of the Oakhaven Estate. Blair covered her ears, her tears flowing freely as the reality of the approaching vehicles set in. Richard squeezed his eyes shut, turning his face away from the flashing lights. Do you hear that sound? Maya asked, her voice calm and steady over the approaching wail of the sirens. Trent stared at the glass doors, his entire body trembling against the rigid grips of the security contractors. Those vehicles are not responding to a noise complaint, Maya informed him, delivering the ultimate cliffhanger to the ruined groom. The local police do not deploy a tactical fleet for a canceled dinner service. The federal agents are pulling into the valet lane right now. They are arriving to execute an active arrest warrant for your systemic wire fraud. You are not walking out of this building. You are leaving in chains. The strobing red and blue emergency lights painted the manicured botanical gardens outside the venue, casting harsh, rhythmic shadows against the vaulted glass ceilings of the grand lobby. The deafening wail of the sirens abruptly cut off, leaving only the low, heavy rumble of powerful engines idling in the private valet lane. The sudden absence of the high-pitched noise created a vacuum of suffocating tension within the room. Every guest, every groomsman, and every family member froze, their eyes fixed on the primary entrance of the estate. The romantic aesthetic of the evening was dead, replaced by the sterile, unforgiving reality of a federal raid. The heavy glass doors swung inward, pushed open with synchronized, tactical precision. A unit of federal agents marched across the threshold. They did not wear formal attire. They wore dark, utilitarian windbreakers bearing the stark yellow lettering of federal law enforcement. Heavy utility belts wrapped around their waists, holding communication radios, steel restraints, and tactical gear. Their thick boots struck the polished marble floorboards in a steady, unified cadence, a sound that obliterated the lingering memory of the ambient classical music. They moved with the cold, unyielding purpose of professionals arriving to extract a targeted liability from the environment. The elite socialites scattered. The curated audience of wealthy guests instinctively stepped backward, flattening themselves against the architectural pillars and the pristine walls, creating a wide, unobstructed path for the authorities. Nobody wanted to stand adjacent to the blast zone of a federal arrest. The two private security contractors employed by my hospitality portfolio recognized the arrival of the federal jurisdiction, operating under strict corporate protocols. Private operatives do not interfere with active government mandates. The towering guards released their rigid grips on the shoulders of the groom. They took a synchronized step backward, raising their hands slightly to signal their compliance to the approaching agents, yielding their captive to the state. Trent felt the sudden absence of the crushing physical restraint. Gravity pulled him forward. He stumbled, his expensive leather shoes scraping against the marble as he fought to maintain his balance. He gasped, pulling a ragged breath into his starved lungs. He looked toward the front doors. The tactical unit blocked the primary exit, advancing across the lobby in a disciplined formation. He looked toward the vaulted windows, recognizing the sheer drop to the gardens below. The groom processed the spatial data with the frantic, erratic speed of a cornered predator. He possessed a single, microscopic window of opportunity before the authorities closed the distance. He needed a secondary exit. He needed to disappear into the structural labyrinth of the massive estate. find an unmonitored service door, and vanish into the dark city streets. His desperate gaze locked onto the corridor situated adjacent to the cocktail alcove. The hallway led directly into the primary catering kitchen, a sprawling industrial space filled with stainless steel prep stations, deep freezers, and a rear loading dock. The loading dock featured a heavy steel door opening into a blind alleyway used for early morning vendor deliveries. It was his only viable geographic escape route. Trent abandoned logic. He surrendered to pure flight instinct. He bolted. The groom sprinted across the lobby, his leather shoes slipping against the smooth stone. His arms pumped wildly at his sides. The bespoke tuxedo, already torn from the scuffle with my father, flapped around his torso like a ragged flag. He pushed his body to the absolute limit, his chest heaving, his vision narrowing into a singular tunnel focused on the dark entrance of the service corridor. He ignored the shouts of the federal agents commanding him to halt. He ignored the weeping bride standing near the floral archway. He believed if he could just breach the kitchen, he could utilize the blind corners and the industrial equipment to evade his pursuers. He closed the distance rapidly, his desperate sprint eating up the floor space. The entrance to the corridor loomed ahead. A figure stepped out of the shadows, planting himself directly in the center of the hallway. Elias did not flinch as the frantic groom hurtled toward him. The veteran venue manager maintained his impeccable posture, his silver hair catching the dim light. He crossed his arms over the chest of his tailored black suit, anchoring his feet against the floorboards. Behind Elias, the service door swung wide open. The invisible army of hospitality workers materialized. The catering staff, the line cooks, the waiters, and the dishwashers poured into the corridor. They wore crisp white uniforms, dark aprons, and professional kitchen attire. They did not carry serving trays or champagne flutes. They moved with unified purpose, stepping up to stand shoulder to shoulder with the venue manager. They formed a solid, impenetrable human wall across the entrance of the service corridor. "Get out of my way!" Trent screamed, his voice cracking into a feral, panicked shriek. "Move!" He did not slow his pace. He assumed the hospitality workers would scatter. Intimidated by his charging momentum, he viewed them as subordinate employees, expecting them to yield to the demands of a wealthy client. He forgot that the client contract was terminated. He forgot who signed their paychecks. Elias and the catering staff held the line. They functioned as a physical extension of my corporate authority. They stood rigid, creating a dense barricade of muscle and bone. Trent collided with the center of the human wall. He slammed into Elias and two broad-shouldered chefs. The impact produced a heavy, breathless thud. The hospitality workers absorbed the kinetic force, shifting backward a fraction of an inch. But they did not break formation. They shoved back, utilizing their combined weight to repel the unauthorized breach. Trent bounced off the impenetrable barrier, the kinetic rejection sending a shockwave through his weary frame. He stumbled backward, his arms flailing, his escape route permanently sealed. He spun around, his eyes wide with raw terror, searching for another direction to run. He turned directly into the path of the lead federal agent. The tactical unit crossed the lobby during his futile sprint toward the kitchen. The lead agent did not issue another verbal command. He executed a textbook, unyielding containment maneuver. The agent lowered his center of gravity, lunged forward, and wrapped his arms around the waist of the groom. The tackle lifted Trent off his feet. The momentum carried both men through the air for a fraction of a second before gravity reclaimed them. Trent slammed into the polished marble floor. The impact was brutal and definitive. The air rushed out of his lungs in a sharp, agonizing gasp. The side of his face struck the cold stone, compounding the swelling bruise inflicted by my father. The custom-tailored tuxedo, designed to project an image of effortless Silicon Valley wealth, suffered its final execution. The heavy friction against the floorboards tore the fabric across the back panel. The expensive seams ripped open. A line of decorative buttons snapped off the cuffs, scattering across the marble like cheap plastic coins. the garment shredded into a ruined, worthless shell. The lead agent drove his knee into the lower spine of the groom, pinning him flat against the floor. A second agent stepped in, grabbing the right wrist of the suspect, wrenching the arm backward at a harsh angle. Trent groaned, a pathetic, wet sound of total surrender. He lacked the oxygen to scream. He lacked the strength to fight. He pressed his bleeding cheek against the stone, staring at the discarded white orchids from his fake groomsmen scattered nearby. The metallic ratcheting of steel handcuffs echoed through the quiet lobby. The cold metal clamped tightly around his right wrist, digging into the skin. The agent pulled the left arm into position, securing the second restraint. The lock clicked with a sharp, unforgiving snap. The physical restriction neutralized his autonomy. He was bound, tethered to the unyielding machinery of the justice system. Trent Sinclair, the lead agent announced, reciting the sterile, mandated protocol over the heavy breathing of the captive. You are under arrest for systemic wire fraud, financial extortion, and the falsification of federal bank records. The agent listed the charges, transforming the visionary entrepreneur into a documented criminal suspect. The elite socialites watched in stunned silence as the groom received his legal autopsy on the floor of the premier wedding venue. Stand up, the second agent ordered. The tactical officers grabbed the captive by the biceps. They hoisted Trent off the marble floor, dragging his dead weight upward. His knees wobbled, his torn tuxedo hanging off his frame in jagged strips. The agents stabilized him, forcing him to stand upright and face the reality of his ruined empire. Trent raised his head. His chest heaved, pulling desperate, ragged breaths into his lungs. His flawless hair was a tangled mess, slick with sweat. His cheek throbbed, stained with a thin line of blood. The arrogant, flashy facade he curated for the past 2 years was gone, evaporated into the ether. He looked across the grand lobby. He bypassed the weeping bride. He bypassed the paralyzed parents. He locked eyes with me. I stood near the center of the room, my posture impeccable, the structured charcoal dress unwrinkled. I did not offer a vindictive smile. I did not shout an insult. I maintained a gaze of pure, clinical detachment, observing his containment with the analytical precision of a forensic auditor. A profound shift occurred within the eyes of the groom. The manic desperation faded, replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. He stared at the corporate drone he mocked upon arrival. He processed the sequence of events, the bounced credit cards, the federal compliance audit, the shredded term sheet, the foreclosed mortgage, the human wall of catering staff blocking his escape. The realization struck him with the kinetic force of a physical blow. The quiet sister standing before him did not just expose his lies. She manipulated the environment, severed his resources, and engineered the trap. He realized the woman he insulted at the front door orchestrated the total, inescapable destruction of his freedom. The federal agents shifted their tactical grips on the captive. Trent offered zero physical resistance. The structural integrity of his ego shattered the moment he realized the scope of his entrapment. The tactical unit marched him toward the primary entrance, their heavy boots establishing a steady, unforgiving cadence against the polished marble. The grand glass doors swung open, granting the harsh glare of the emergency strobes full access to the luxurious lobby. Rhythmic flashes of red and blue light washed over the pale, sweating face of the ruined groom. He stumbled across the threshold, guided by the unyielding arms of law enforcement. The heavy doors swung shut behind him. Through the thick architectural glass, the remaining occupants of the room watched the agents press the suspect against the side of an armored transport vehicle, initiating the rigorous search protocol before securing him inside the steel cage. The powerful engine roared to life, the heavy tires crunching against the private gravel driveway, and the vehicle disappeared into the dark city night, taking the fake billionaire with it. The departure of the authorities left the curated audience of elite socialites standing in a barren transit hall. The illusion of the high society wedding evaporated, leaving only the grim, Sterile reality of a federal crime scene. The guests did not linger to offer condolences to the bride or the parents. High society operates on a strict code of self-preservation. They understood the toxic nature of proximity to a federal indictment. The socialites moved toward the coat check alcove in a swift, silent wave. They retrieved their designer jackets and fur wraps, deliberately avoiding eye contact with the paralyzed family members standing near the center of the room. The mass exodus occurred in suffocating quiet. A rapid evacuation of individuals desperate to distance their own reputations from the escalating scandal. Within minutes, the sprawling lobby emptied, leaving only the immediate bloodline standing amidst the wreckage of the reception. Blair remained anchored near the towering floral archway. Her custom silk gown, specifically tailored to dominate bridal magazine covers and generate digital engagement, now looked heavy and tragic. A costume from a canceled play. She stared at her left hand. The ring, the cheap copper band holding the worthless cubic zirconia, no longer represented a promise of limitless offshore wealth. It represented her profound gullibility. The physical jewelry felt like a burning weight against her skin. With a sudden, jerky motion, she grabbed the synthetic stone and pulled the ring off her fourth finger. She did not throw it across the room in a fit of theatrical rage. She simply opened her palm and let it drop. The base metal hit the marble floorboards with a dull, hollow clink. The ring rolled a few inches before coming to rest near a discarded white orchid left behind by the fake groomsmen. She abandoned the physical symbol of her delusion. Blair lifted her head, her ruined cosmetics smearing dark, jagged tracks down her pale cheeks. She looked at the locked mahogany doors of the ballroom, then shifted her frantic gaze toward me. For 30 years, the golden child weaponized her tears to extract sympathy, resources, and unearned grace from our parents. She assumed that specific manipulation tactic retained its currency. She took a slow, trembling step forward, closing the physical distance across the cold stone floor. "Harper," she whispered, her voice a fragile, broken rasp echoing under the vaulted glass ceilings. She did not apologize for marrying a predator. She did not acknowledge the glaring fact that her chosen groom orchestrated the theft of our parents' home equity. She focused entirely on her own immediate discomfort and the impending collapse of her public brand. "The media is going to find out about the arrest," Blair continued, her chest heaving as a fresh wave of panic tightened her throat. "The financial blogs, the local news networks, the social media aggregator accounts. They are going to publish the federal indictments. They are going to post those unauthorized videos from the lobby. My residential address is listed on public corporate directories. The paparazzi will swarm my apartment building. I cannot go home. I cannot let them photograph me walking through my own lobby, looking like this." She reached her hands out, attempting to grasp my wrists, searching for the familial warmth she spent her entire life rejecting. I kept my hands folded neatly in front of my structured charcoal dress, denying her the physical connection. She grasped at empty air, her hands dropping awkwardly to her sides. "You own this estate," Blair pleaded, her voice pitching higher, desperate to secure a fortified sanctuary. "You control the luxury bridal suites on the top floor, the penthouses with the private elevator access and the encrypted key cards. Let me stay up there, just for a few nights, until the news cycle moves on and the bloggers find a new target. Hide me. You have to protect me. I am your sister." I looked at the weeping bride, analyzing the core architecture of her request. She did not seek redemption or accountability. She sought an aesthetic shield to hide from the consequences of her own superficial metrics. She wanted to utilize my real estate portfolio to insulate her fragile ego from the public scrutiny she actively courted for years. "I do not operate a sanctuary for enablers," I stated, my voice slicing through the quiet tension of the empty lobby with sterile precision. "I run a premium corporate asset. The luxury suites on the top floor command a steep nightly rate. They are reserved for legitimate clients who honor their financial contracts. not for individuals hiding from the collateral damage of their own manufactured illusions. Blair flinched, the rejection striking her like a physical blow. She shook her head, unable to comprehend the denial. "But I have nothing left," she cried, gesturing wildly toward the empty space where the cocktail bars used to sit. "Trent took everything. He ruined my life. You exposed him. You broke the engagement. You owe me a safe place to sleep." "I did not break your engagement," I corrected her, dissecting her victim narrative with clinical accuracy. "I exposed a tumor. You chose to marry a man based entirely on the brand of his leased sports car and the carat weight of a fake diamond. You ignored his lack of character because he promised you a throne in a fabricated kingdom. Your life is ruined because you prioritized optics over integrity. I owe you nothing." I reached into my structured leather clutch one final time. I did not retrieve another foreclosure notice or a federal compliance audit. I retrieved a sleek, black corporate folio bearing the embossed silver logo of the Oakhaven Estate. I opened the leather flap, extracting a single sheet of heavy, textured invoice paper. I stepped forward, breaking the physical distance, and pressed the document directly against the chest of her ruined silk gown. Blair instinctively raised her trembling hands, grasping the paper to prevent it from falling to the floor. "That is the final accounting for the evening," I informed her, keeping my tone razor sharp. Blair looked down at the paper, her tear-streaked eyes scanning the rigid columns of black ink. "The venue requires immediate compensation for the services rendered prior to the contractual termination," I explained, walking her through the financial ledger. "The invoice details the premium setup cost for the imported white orchids you demanded. It covers the union labor rates for the rigging team who installed the crystal chandeliers in the dining hall. It includes the hazard pay for the elite private security contractors who subdued your unhinged groom." Blair let out a choked sob, staring at the staggering numerical total printed at the bottom of the page. "Furthermore," I added, delivering the ultimate financial penalty. The document outlines the strict, non-negotiable cancellation fee. When a client defaults on a premier date, the venue loses the opportunity to book a legitimate event. You occupy a time slot you cannot afford. You will reimburse my corporate holding company for the lost revenue. The payment is due upon receipt." Richard and Caroline stood frozen near the coat check alcove. They watched their golden child receive a crippling corporate invoice mere minutes after her groom departed in handcuffs. The enabler parents lacked the strength to intervene. Their suburban dynasty was reduced to ashes. They possessed no home equity to steal, no retirement to leverage, and no social standing to weaponize. They were empty vessels. Witnessing the systematic dismantling of the daughter they insulated from reality, Caroline took a hesitant step forward, her lips parting as if she intended to beg for mercy, to ask for a payment plan, to plead for a sliver of familial grace. I shifted my gaze toward my mother. I did not utter a single word. I simply held her eyes, projecting a cold, unyielding wall of executive boundary. The matriarch stopped walking. Her shoulders sagged. She closed her mouth, recognizing that any further manipulation would only accelerate their ruin. I turned my attention away from my family. I looked toward the veteran venue manager, standing near the service corridor. "Elias," I said. The manager stepped forward instantly, his posture immaculate, his silver hair catching the light. "Yes, Ma, am. The event is officially concluded," I instructed, formalizing the termination of their presence on my property. "Escort the unauthorized individuals off the premises. Secure the perimeter." Elias bowed his head, accepting the directive. He gestured toward the two towering private security contractors. The operatives moved with silent, synchronized efficiency. They flanked the weeping bride and the paralyzed parents. They did not lay their hands on my family, but their physical proximity offered zero room for argument. The sheer size of the guards dictated immediate compliance. "This way," Elias stated, extending his arm toward the front entrance of the estate. His voice held the polite, unforgiving tone of a professional executing a forced eviction. Blair clutched the itemized invoice to her chest. She turned around, her silk gown dragging across the marble floorboards, sweeping over the discarded fake diamond. She walked toward the exit, her head bowed in total defeat. Richard and Caroline followed her, shuffling like ghosts through the grand lobby they once believed they commanded. The security contractors guided them across the threshold, ensuring they cleared the heavy glass doors. I walked slowly behind them, my heels clicking against the stone. I stopped at the entrance, standing just inside the building. The cool night air rushed in as the family stepped onto the private gravel driveway. They stood in the dark, stripped of their wealth, their home, and their golden child illusion. They looked back at me, standing in the warm, opulent light of the premier venue I owned. I did not offer a farewell. I permanently excommunicated the enablers from my life and my real estate empire. I reached out and grasped the brass handles of the grand entrance. I pulled the heavy doors shut, the thick architectural glass sealing the lobby with a definitive, mechanical click. I engaged the electromagnetic deadbolt, locking them outside in the cold wilderness of their own choices. The sound of the electromagnetic deadbolt locking my family out of the estate echoed far beyond that cold winter night. 6 months passed. Time operates as a ruthless auditor, stripping away the remaining illusions and balancing the ledgers of reality. The dust settled over the wreckage of the suburban dynasty, leaving a landscape defined by strict consequences and inescapable truths. The federal justice system moves with grinding, mechanical certainty. Trent did not secure a high-priced defense team to fight his indictments. He possessed zero liquid capital to retain a private lawyer, and the venture capital Syndicate blacklisted his name across the globe. A tired public defender negotiated his plea agreement in a sterile government office. A federal judge sentenced the fraudulent groom to 8 years in a medium-security penitentiary for systemic wire fraud, financial extortion, and the falsification of bank records. The man who wore a bespoke tuxedo and drank vintage champagne now wears a coarse, faded khaki jumpsuit. His daily routine lacks the curated aesthetic of a Silicon Valley pioneer. He wakes up at 4 a.m. to the sharp, unforgiving buzz of an electronic siren. He does not manage offshore accounts or pitch proprietary algorithms to elite socialites. He works in the prison kitchen. He spends 10 hours a day standing over a steaming industrial sink, scrubbing baked grease off heavy aluminum baking trays. The air around him smells of cheap bleach and boiled cabbage. During his mandated recreation hour, he sits on a metal bench in the concrete yard and tries to pitch his technology startup to the other inmates. He speaks of user acquisition models and scaling phases. The other prisoners ignore him, treating him like a broken radio, broadcasting static. He is a ghost trapped in a steel cage of his own making, stripped of his aesthetic armor, paying off his legal debt at 12 cents an hour. The generational wealth my parents spent 30 years bragging about evaporated the moment the proxy firm executed the foreclosure notice. Richard and Caroline lost their sprawling colonial home in Connecticut. The real estate market absorbed the property, erasing their physical footprint from the affluent suburb they used to rule. The former country club elites now reside in a tiny, drafty one-bedroom apartment located in a dense, noisy industrial district. The thin walls of their unit vibrate every time a commercial freight train rolls past their cracked window. Richard traded his tailored golf slacks for a generic dark uniform. He leased a low-end economy sedan and works 12-hour shifts as a rideshare driver to pay off the crushing civil penalties associated with his defaulted loans. The aging patriarch spends his nights navigating congested city traffic. He picks up wealthy executives from the financial district, the exact type of men he used to pretend to be. He listens to them close corporate deals in the back seat. A constant, agonizing reminder of the elite status he threw away. They treat him like an invisible piece of machinery, barking directions and slamming his doors. Caroline faces a similar daily purgatory. The matriarch who once judged my modest wardrobe and demanded I fund a luxury reception now clips paper coupons and checks the clearance racks at a local discount grocery market. Her former socialite friends refuse to acknowledge her existence. When she crosses paths with an old acquaintance on the street, the women cross the avenue to avoid making eye contact. They view her poverty as a contagious disease. The suburban royalty became untouchable exiles in their own hometown. Blair experienced the most severe psychological freefall. When the offshore wire transfers ceased, the international server farms deactivated her purchased bot accounts. Her follower count plummeted from over 1 million to less than 400 genuine users overnight. The cosmetic brands and lifestyle sponsors canceled her superficial contracts. The digital kingdom she used to dictate her superiority vanished into the ether, revealing the hollow void beneath. Deprived of a luxury penthouse, a wealthy groom, and parental funding, the golden child had to enter the actual workforce. She secured a minimum wage retail job at a fast fashion outlet in a crowded, dying suburban mall. The bride who demanded imported white orchids and a crystal chandelier reception now spends her days standing under harsh fluorescent lights. She wears a polyester uniform vest, folding synthetic denim jeans and restacking disrupted display tables left behind by careless teenagers. Last week, one of the elite socialites from her canceled wedding walked into the retail store. Blair recognized the woman immediately. She tried to offer a polite, familiar greeting, desperate to revive a shred of her past glory. The socialite looked at her ruined manicure, offered a blank stare of unvarnished pity, and walked out without purchasing a single item. Blair possesses zero influence. Her cheap prepaid smartphone remains silent all day long. I stand inside the executive penthouse office of my corporate headquarters. The room features floor-to-ceiling tempered glass, offering an unobstructed panoramic view of the bustling city skyline below. The chaotic noise of the streets cannot penetrate the thick architectural panes. The space is a sanctuary of sterile, quiet efficiency. I rest my hands on the edge of a sleek slate desk, reviewing the finalized contracts for a major international real estate acquisition in the European market. I do not work alone. Maya sits across the room, analyzing the regulatory frameworks of the impending merger. Following the total collapse of the wedding, I offered my sister-in-law a new executive contract. She left the Federal Compliance Division and accepted the role of Chief Operating Officer for my venture capital firm. We forged a lethal corporate alliance built on competence, mutual respect, and a shared intolerance for parasites. She wears a striking sapphire suit, her brilliant, analytical mind dissecting the global data with predatory speed. We built an empire over the ruins of the men who underestimated us. The architecture of human dynamics is often flawed. Society conditions us to believe that blood relation demands infinite grace. The traditional narrative dictates that you must absorb the toxicity, fund the delusions, and endure the blatant disrespect of your family simply because you share a genetic code. The world expects you to shrink your potential to accommodate their fragile egos. I reject that metric. True wealth is not defined by flashy displays, leased sports cars, cubic zirconia, or curated social media optics. True wealth is the power to establish unyielding boundaries. It is the capacity to cut off the rot before it infects your foundation. It is the ability to dismantle the illusions of the people who mock you. Lock the heavy glass doors and sleep soundly while they starve in the wilderness they created for themselves. Thank you for listening to this story. If you have ever had to sever ties with toxic family members to protect your future and your peace of mind, drop a comment below. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories about setting boundaries and reclaiming your power. Let me know where you are watching from today. Keep building your empire in silence, and never let anyone underestimate your worth.